Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show tonight. The Seahawks have played another game. The Seahawks have lost another game. And we've got to pull it apart. We've got to dissect it. And we got to dissect maybe this season. Because I'll just cut right to the chase here. That may have been it. That may have been the final strike. And we got to figure out how it happened. We got to figure out why it happened. And we got to figure out what we can do to make sure it never happens again, because I don't think anybody in here ever wants to see a game quite like the game we just saw the Seahawks play on Sunday. So I am Brendan, and that is Brandon of the Hawks Nest. We are going to break this one down together. How are you doing tonight, Brandon?
As you say, it's a little bit more with a bit of a dour mood here. I never like being in the final game of the season, having to have an opposition lose for us to get in, and it does feel a little bit like I don't know if we're going to be able to touch upon Lady Luck 2 seasons in a row. That might seem like maybe a bit too much to ask from the luck gods.
Yeah, it is looking unlikely, and I'll just be honest. There's no guarantee we're even going to be able to help ourselves. There's no guarantee we're going to even be able to take care of our side of things.
It's true.
As of right now, I think that it would be maybe a little bit optimistic to say we're just going to take care of business in this one. But let's go ahead and just kind of start opening things up a little bit. We'll do injury stuff in a couple days on the pregame show. Not going to get into that, but there is some injury stuff coming out of this game, of course. I'm sure we all know about it. But so generally speaking, how did you come out of that game? How did you feel?
I felt like it was a game that was very familiar to one that we've seen many times over. It's not that we see it on a weekly basis, but we've just seen this type of game show itself for, I would say, even some years on end now. Getting controlled at the line of scrimmage, especially defensively, the soft zone coverages, the simplistic nature of things on the defensive side of the ball, not being physical enough at the line of scrimmage, especially, and finding yourself taken out of the hole and not coming into tackle. Again, the lack of tackling showing up, or just as how many who really want to get out there on that defense want to tackle on this team. I maintain that this is not only just a bad tackling Hawk team, Brendan. I know that we say these kind of hyperboles at times, and it's a way to kind of catch people's attention, but I'm hard pressed to think about a recent Seahawks team that was this bad at tackling. I can't think of one in my recent memory. I'm sure there's one somebody goes 96. That was okay, but it's been a long period of time, and all of those things working together that I just talked about, Brendan, serve to be a crap storm of just not a lot to feel good about when it comes to especially this defense, this team, and the direction where they're going right now.
Yeah, I do agree with a lot of that. I speculated in my post-game video that adjusted for opponent and adjusted for circumstance, that was the worst game our defense has played in the Pete Carroll era ever. That was the worst ever. Like, I was thinking about giving up almost 500 yards to Cam Newton. That was in week 2. That was the COVID year. I was thinking about some of their other pretty bad games, like maybe some games back in 2010. That defense wasn't even Pete's defense. That was the defense he inherited from Holmgren and Mora. I was thinking about a couple of these other games where the defense was really bad. Buffalo. The Buffalo had a really good offense that year. To do that against a team playing their third-string quarterback, an offense that isn't even that good when they have their starting quarterback, it feels like a new level of badness.
It certainly is a possibility here that's what we are seeing. I mean, to me, it just feels like it runs together for me. So it's hard to distinguish this one and say, okay, well, this is your crown jewel of horribleness. It feels like the Carolina game. It feels like the Raider game. It feels like these recent ones that we've gotten into, where maybe there was a little more offense in this one than those ones, but it was all the same way in which you're being beat is the bottom line. It's the same. It isn't, well, this week we tried this strategy and then they tried that strategy and then they came hammering head to head and they just got the better with this strategy. And the next week we tried that strategy and then they tried this strategy and then that had it. And then this, it was more of, you're doing the wash, rinse, repeat thing of trying these same old strategies out and they're not working. Carroll told on the interview, I think it was on Monday with with ESPN, where he's saying, yeah, we came into this game protecting against the deep ball, really worried about their deep ball. Now, see, the same for me saying it. That's out of Carroll's mouth. This isn't a Carroll hater saying this. This is going. How do we arrive at a place, Brendan, where we walk into this game against this Steeler team knowing the way they want to play offense and say that the biggest thing that we need to put the onus upon is the deep ball with third stringer Randolph? And then the great part being also then, of course, that you don't actually end up preventing the deep ball. You still end up giving up chunk plays, despite this also being the point of emphasis for you throughout the week according to Coach Carroll. As I've said many times over, this is what I say when I say this is kind of maddening for me to watch a little bit.
Yeah, were it not for the previous 2 games we played, I would watch that game and assume the team has quit on Carroll. They just don't care anymore. Like, watching that game and trying to justify it in my head is like, there's no way they could be this bad if they're actually trying. They're just not trying. But I watched what I watched in the 2 previous games, and I'm like, yeah, that team looked like they were trying at least. So I don't know what to read into it, but I do put this on the coaches at the end of the day. It's hard for me to believe every single player on this team forgot how to tackle at once. So I look at it as a preparation thing. I look at it as, he didn't push the right buttons this week. And some of it's because the players are probably tired because they've been so overworked this year. Guys like Jaron Reed and Bobby Wagner. Yeah, that's Pete's fault too. He didn't build depth. He didn't come up with a plan to mitigate the fact that a lot of our players are old. So I look at it every way I look at it, and I'm just, I can't believe we're here right now.
Yeah, the thing you're kind of insinuating about that I've heard a little bit about, it's not a thing that you're hearing from a lot of voices, but you hear from a few saying, well, no, this is really going back to a talent issue. And it'll be a thing that I take some umbrage with as we go through the off season, because I think it can become the scapegoat, right? Rather than being the coordinator this off season, it becomes, no, it was the talent. That's the why, the scheme's great. Carroll's great. It's the talent. He's just got a clean house of the bad personalities in house that aren't bought in or aren't doing that one I really do struggle with. I've said that it can be a both thing rather than an either or thing. And I do think that it's on the more minor side of it being the talent aspect. Yeah, talent does need to improve, but like you're talking about, it's more about getting the buy-in. That's what we need to get at this point in time. And that's what seems to be a bit, appears at least on the surface. We can't know for sure, but it does appear on the surface that there's some of that missing, at least with some of the players.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, like, we got that quote from KJ a couple weeks ago where he basically said, yeah, the team's quitting on Carroll. That's what I see. And then they win those next 2 games. And I'm like, okay, I guess they're not quitting on him. And then I see that game and I don't know what to feel. Maybe they're just really, really bad. But to be perfectly honest, it's hard for me to see it that way. For one, we have the second most expensive defense in the NFL. Like, literally, we have spent more cash in our defense than every other team in the league except the 49ers. Only the 49ers are spending money the way we are.
Wow. I wasn't aware of that stat. That's oof.
Yeah, and it's not all youth. People keep trying to say, "Oh, we're young. We're young." We're not that young on defense. Diggs is not young. I know Adams isn't out there the last couple games. He's not young. Dre'mont's in his prime. Bobby Wagner is certainly not young.
Julian Love.
Yeah, Julian Love, not young. Jaron Reed is the opposite of young. Leonard Williams is not young.
Michael Jackson, Trey Brown, those guys are youngish, but they're 3-4 years into their career. That's time. If you're not ready to go by that point, you're not going to be ready to go.
So hard for me to buy into any of that kind of stuff. And I say this way too much. I say this so much it's lost all meaning, but it really just feels like a breaking point with me with this regime, with this era. Like, to see a third string quarterback go into Seattle. Granted, you could have been fooled into thinking it was Pittsburgh with the way the crowd was made up. I'll admit that. And give up almost 500 yards to a third string quarterback with a mediocre at best offensive line. That Pittsburgh offensive line is nothing special whatsoever. And you just get completely dominated at the line of scrimmage. You force 1 punt, 0 turnovers, 1 sack. I don't know. I feel like that as a Seahawks fan, you have to watch that and you have to learn something from that. You have to look at that and go, man, maybe these things I was thinking about this team and this regime and this coaching staff weren't right. That game has to be a wake-up call.
I would think that it certainly at least fits in line with if you're looking for the collection of evidence to present to the court about an ongoing issue. In the same, we can say about to let Carroll go or not, but just that there is this big issue that's not being dealt with on the team. This fits right along into that evidence. And I think when you talk about stopping the run, Brendan, players themselves and coaches themselves, and players especially, will talk about this. That stopping the run is, yeah, at times about the talent on either side of the football field, but it's also mostly about will and putting yourself in there and really being committed to being a good run defender. And so when you look at this game, Brendan, where for the first time this season, they went to the 5-man under fronts that we'd asked for.
Yeah.
They went to the 5-man, 5-down lineman, Derek Hall, stand-up Sam linebacker. You went to those looks, and yet they still ran all over you. It did nothing to stem the tide as far as the ground attack from the Steelers. Nothing. Mm-hmm. And it does come back in my mind to message is not being received. Is it the right message? I don't know anymore. Is it tactically the right message? I don't know. It would seem like if you're getting players checking out like this in this culture that's supposed to be so established and pro friendly and player friendly, that if they're so turning off on this, maybe that's a bit of an indicator that perhaps maybe it's not the right one. And then if you're going to get the players to buy in, they got to see that it's also a scheme that works. And if they see it's a scheme that doesn't work, you're not going to be able to fool the players for very long.
Right. So we're already talking about the defense, so let's just keep kind of going a little bit further into the defense. Jaron Reed seemed like he played okay. Leonard Williams, he had a couple hits on the quarterback. I guess he did his job. Other than that, it's hard to find guys to be even remotely positive about, right? Like, I will admit that Jordan Love was missed because Devin Bush did not look particularly good, although I'm not into
Brooks, you mean?
Yeah, Brooks. What did I say?
I think I said Love there. I might have heard Jordan.
Yeah, Jordan Brooks was missed, I will admit. There was a downgrade clearly from him to Devin Bush, although I'm not interested in blaming things on Devin Bush right now. Like, there's an ocean of ineptitude out there. Devin Bush is not going to be able to swim to safety out of that ocean. Like, that's not – he's a backup linebacker making $3 million this year. But the point is, yeah, there was a little bit of that going on here. But, when you see tackling that bad, let's just start there because that was the most fundamentally wrong thing. What does that say to you? Does it say the players are tired because it's the end of the season? They're old. They've given what does that say to you?
Well, I think that there's going to be the stat I'm going to be looking at the end of the season to pay attention to this, Brendan, is going to be in total defensive snaps. And I'm going to make, this is a blind guess. I haven't looked at this, but I'm going to make a very strong guess, Brendan, that we are going to be probably the team that leads the NFL in having the most defensive snaps. And is that not in itself rationally then going to then lead to fatigue and exhaustion, which then will lead to a lack of tackling consistently? My argument would be that's a bit of it, at least. Let me give some backing to this game and kind of marrying that up for you on this. Look at the snap counts that we have for Leonard Williams and Jaron Reed in this game. And for Dre'Mont Jones, 65 for Boye Mafe, 55 for Dre'Mont Jones. Okay, let's look at our backup rotational guys. Cameron Young, 7 total snaps. Miles Adams, 5 total snaps. So you're not going to your rotation. You're trying to lean on the front guys to carry the day there and play too many snaps, quite frankly, without any rotation because you can't trust your backups in there. When you brought the backups in there for those 7 snaps, being Cameron Young and Miles Adams, they were your 2 worst graded defenders on the whole defense on the day. So you can see how this fatigue part's lining up. You can see how on some of these guys that, maybe they are a little bit winded as you get through the points of these games. And some of that is bearing into this part of it. But it does speak to the lack of ability to build up even a somewhat sufficient amount of depth on the squad because it's not like they're wrecked by injuries here, Brendan. You've got Uchenna went down for a season-ending injury. Aside from that, you've kept all your corners. Your safety went down with Jamal Adams, but you had Julian Love there as the backup plan there. It shouldn't be at a point where you're needing to necessarily play your frontline guys this much to wear them out, knowing that that's what's going to happen when you play them this many snaps.
Yeah, that's actually one thing that I do want to talk about a little bit. A lot of people, I see it all over the place, are trying to say the Seahawks season went off the rails because they had a ridiculous number of injuries. And I will be very interested to see like if there are any metrics that come out that try to actually calculate how bad injuries hit the Seahawks versus other teams. But I feel like our injuries are not much worse or much better than most other teams. Like especially on defense.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like we've had some years, you and I have been doing this, where we went, man, this was the year we were back we were going Ivan the Terrible. We're talking about the training coach. We've had talks like that before. It hasn't quite felt like that to me this year either on that side. It doesn't.
Yeah,
I think we've had our share, but everybody's had their share, especially in these 17-game seasons.
Yeah. The offensive line, I think if you want to say offensive line injuries derailed the offense, I might be willing to agree with you there because the offensive line's never been able to build continuity, but the defense, like, let's think about this for a second. Defensive line, Jaron Reed has played every game. Dre'Mont Jones has played every game. Mario Edwards has missed one game. Leonard Williams has played every game since he got here. Edge rusher, Nwosu gets hurt. That sucks. Obviously, that's a big deal. I'm not going to downplay that, but Mafe missed one game. Hall played every game. Taylor played every game. Inside linebacker, Wagner played every game. Brooks has now missed like maybe 2 games total across his 2 injuries. I mean, that sucks, but it's 2 games. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. If Jordan Brooks is the linchpin to your defense not being the worst defense in the league, then you built the defense wrong.
Amen.
Yeah. Witherspoon's missed like 4 total games, I guess, with injuries. Okay, that sucks, but played most of the season. You've still been bad in most games that he's played in. Woolen's missed like 2 games this year or something.
That sounds right.
Yeah, it's not that bad. Like there are defenses out there. Like look at the Bills defense. Look what they've overcome. They've been devastated. Like I'd say 3-4 times more than the Seahawks have.
They have 3 Uchenna situations going on in their team between the middle linebacker, Daquan Jones, and Tre'Davious White, 2 of their more important defensive players, to your point on that, who went down. And they've had other injuries on top of that, yet have still been able to find a way to maintain the line on that. And we'll have our share. We'll probably be middle of the road, but we're not going to be league worst like we've been in the past under Carroll at times when you look through the seasons that lost game due to injury.
Yeah, even like New England. New England had a ton of defensive injuries this year, and Belichick kept them in like that top 10, top 12. Like it's not. It's really something that should be overcome. I remember even within our own organization. Remember all the injuries we had on defense in 2014, and they kept bringing it. Like it took like 8 or 9 significant injuries to that defense for them to break down at the end of that Super Bowl.
And I'd argue with you too with this. Just the thing you did with part of the reason your investment's so high in this defense, both from a draft pick point and from a also monetary point that you talked about, is because of the fact that you built in supposed depth to be able to deal with injury. Julian Love's presence here is supposed to be able to give you the insurance policy for Jamal if he goes down again. Devin Bush's presence here is supposed to give you the insurance policy if the guy coming back off the torn ACL and Jordan Brooks couldn't get back kind of full rolling this year. So like you didn't give those guys huge deals, but you gave them some money. They're not league minimum. They aren't just a draft pick filling out the roster. So it's also to me kind of an empty excuse to go to just the injuries when you really look at the full scale, especially defensively and how far they've been able to even get past last year's point and how they perform worse than last year's point, I think, at this point.
Well, if you want to strictly go in terms of stats, last year we were 25th in points allowed. Right now we are 24th. So at this rate, by 2049, we're going to have a really good defense.
It's incremental, Brendan. You got to buy into the incremental process. Nothing gets accomplished overnight in this NFL.
Yeah. So, start working out, start eating healthy, and you might live to see another good Seahawks defense.
Amen. Or your grandchild.
I mean, God, it's so hard to separate individual things out on this defense because everything was just so unbelievably bad. I mean, I guess Mafe more or less did his job. I don't think he did anything wrong per se, but no pass rush whatsoever on Mason Rudolph, which is embarrassing. Like, this is an opportunity for you to have a game where you don't worry about the deep ball at all. It's Mason Rudolph. I know he's got good receivers, but you should be willing to live with him hitting a couple of deep balls. And you don't send much of anything at him. I think I saw a couple of 6-man blitzes maybe, but they were ineffective. They were like, let's send the 2 inside linebackers, and then they just run into a big pile of bodies and not actually get anywhere near the quarterback. What did you think of Julian Love in this game? Let me ask you about that one, because he's been in the spotlight the last couple weeks.
The tackling kind of can be issues here and there with him at times. He gave up some plays in coverage a bit over the top. I think overall this year he's been solid for us, and he's functional. I don't think he's part of a future there for either position as we go into the future. But on the 1-year deal he has remaining, if we really are going to, and we'll have to talk about whether or not the team's going to really be willing to do this move off of Adams. But if you're going to move off of that, then you'd have a guy there that would be pretty cheap who could give you a functional player that's at least league average to a smidge above league average by the end of the year, right? He arrives at 68, 69 on a PFF score when you look at his rate at the end. He's get you a couple interceptions. He's made his share of tackles. He's been a player that can play some free safety, some strong safety, some down in the box slot if you need him to at times. He can blitz well. He gives you a lot there. Now, is he giving you anything that's sizzling and electric at that point? No. And will you get the occasional game like this one as we have this year? I think the Detroit game was another one that he had. It was a tough game for him in coverage, and he got beat up on a little bit. Sure. There certainly is, there's certainly a couple of games that might come up. But I think the overall in him, the way it would net out if you went over the full season with him at a safety, is that he would be a little bit above average, and it gives you some playmaking, some ability to take away the ball, which also to me provides some extra value.
Right, okay, so Witherspoon, I don't think we need to talk about it too much. He did not play good, but it was his first game back from an injury. He barely made it back for this game. It's tough for him to, the margins are thin for a guy like Witherspoon because he is so small. So you take any little edge away from him and he's going to miss tackles, right?
He's probably a little rusty too, been out for a couple weeks, and he's at the end of a season that's been a long first opening season for a rookie. He's right in those guys who probably played a lot of snaps throughout the year. But yeah, it's every rookie's going to have some of those games where you're not quite in there to do it. And he was aggressive out there. He was a guy that I will say that when you talk about buy-in and whether you don't have to question that guy's heart, you don't have to question whether that guy's out there doing everything he can. I do know, and if he misses a tackle, it may happen, but it's not going to be because of lack of effort or intensity. That's absolutely what you get from Witherspoon on a weekly basis. And so he'll be, I think he'll be fine in the long term, but he's had a couple games. The Cowboy game was a rough one in that first half in that game. He's had a couple games here in the back half of the schedule where he hasn't been necessarily as sensational as he was right out the gate, but his long-term future is still a star. And he's still going to be, I think, a big part of what we can build around in this defense moving forward.
Absolutely. I'm still in love with him. Still a big fan. Not going to get too down on it. I mean, again, there's an ocean of incompetence on this defense. Yeah. There's only so much you can do to swim your way out of that. But go ahead.
I do think Derek Hall played a little bit of a better game than he has this year. May have been his best game overall. I thought he finally started to show you a little bit more of what he can bring to the table this season.
Yeah, you actually let him play. You actually let him play a decent number of snaps.
Yeah.
As it turns out, 4 snaps is not enough to get your footing. Who knew?
No. He's one of those guys that does need to figure out and learn how to tackle. He needs to go to the tackle sled this offseason. He's one of those guys. We got a couple of those guys. Woolen's got to get out there to the tackling sled this offseason. Those guys need to learn to wrap up because the Hall just has a hard time pulling. He'll try. He gets his arms around, but it tends to just get him around the waist and then slides right off down to the feet. But he played good. He did play pretty good over him.
Yeah, I think he made a tackle for loss. I don't think PFF was a big fan of his, which tells me he's probably on a snap-to-snap basis really struggling to set against the run.
Mm-hmm.
But we are starting to see some positive movement there. And I mean,
they've hammered him throughout the year. So their 58 grade on this one that's like for him getting an 80 grade for how they've looked at him throughout the season.
Yeah, I'm still got some optimism about his future. That's why I made that video a couple weeks ago. Edge rushers who are not super blue chippers usually don't do anything as a rookie.
Yeah. I'm okay with it. It took Moffitt that year to take the step forward. I'm totally open to seeing him take that step forward over an off season, and I think it will come. And so he may not be a guy that's got superstar upside to him, but he's still going to be a guy I think we'll be very happy with when we look back at this in a couple of years about where he is, especially the combination of him and Moffitt off the edge.
All right, so let's see. Yeah, that was the Derek Hall. I did want to ask you about one other thing that I noticed that was interesting on the defense. It was Trey Brown kind of got sidelined in this game in favor of Mike Jackson, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of interesting. So you've got this game, Woolen plays basically every snap. And then they decided to basically let Jackson take all the snaps at the other side. And then Witherspoon played about half the game. I think he was in and out with an injury. And then Trey Brown played like 9 snaps, which is interesting to me because Trey Brown has been a solid player for this defense pretty much all year. Do you think there was like maybe a matchup thing going on there? Or do you think they just think Mike Jackson has come on so strongly here, they want him on the field as much as possible?
Tackling, I think. The run defense has been such a problem for recent weeks that getting another rugged defender out there that can put their nose in it in the tackling game versus Trey Brown, who can be a bit up and down in his tackling. Woolen, who obviously is not a good tackler. And then with Witherspoon, like you said, he was beat up a little bit. You couldn't run him out there a full 100% of the snaps. So they did that at the course. I think, that was one of the big draws with moving Woolen off the field with a shoulder injury at the time for Jackson when they did was let's get a guy out there that can, actually, tackle and hold up out there. So I think that's their thinking behind it. They were going to plan on trying to keep the corners on top, Brendan, by what Carroll was saying too as well. By when he says that means, okay, we're going to run a cover 3 that day. And that's what they ran a lot of. You're going to get a lot of cover 4 and cover 3. We're going to run those corners off cover, drop to depth. So that was also a place where with Jackson, you have a bit of a taller player too at 6'1" over Trey, going up against a guy like George Pickens with the ball skills to go up there and get it. Maybe you have a guy that's a little bit able to be more testy out there as far as at the point of catch, be able to maybe dislodge the ball. But that's me maybe thinking too far out the box. Maybe it's just the tackling. Didn't work.
Nothing worked.
He was a 29 rated tackler with a 56 rated run game in this one. So it's not like he brought it like they thought that he was going to bring it. So it's weird. It's like the whole defense, half of them, 3/4 of them have lost the ability to tackle a ball carrier. I know it's a problem across the NFL, but we have like the worst problem of it here in Seattle this particular season.
Yeah, and that's why it's hard for me to get that mad at the players. Like I do a little bit, but how did all of them do it at the same time? Like there has to be something systemic there.
I don't get it either. I wish I could give you an explanation. I don't have it. I again don't just think it goes back to them just being all crappy players across the board and we got a clean full house. Number one, that's not an answer anyway, because that doesn't address any of the issues you ended up with these players in the first place. If it's all that bad across the board, you got to clear the deck, then somebody probably should be held accountable on that point in time. But I don't have any explanation for, other than we talked about the fatigue thing. That certainly is an explanation, is you have everybody would be impacted that way because all of them have played those extra snaps. But not in the case of a guy like Mike Jackson, who's been out of the lineup for a lot of this year. He should be pretty fresh. Devin Bush should be pretty fresh out there to cook and make it happen. I guess he tackled pretty good according to the grade. But, in the case of most of the people on your defense, aside from that, you got a bunch of people probably, maybe that's what's going on here. That snap count's going to be interesting, Brendan. If we end up at 1,500 snaps and the next team below us defensively is at 1,250.
Yeah, I actually have the exact numbers for the Seahawks snap counts on defense this year. It's actually 1,119, which I don't know if it leads the league, but I know it's top 3.
Okay.
At least. It's at least top 3. And we're also under 1,000 on offense, which might be the biggest imbalance in the league, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
And one thing that I've really been trying to get people to understand is it's more on the defense than the offense. The defense is allowing these teams to convert third downs at a league high rate. The defense is allowing these super long drives. Like a lot of people try to say, well, the defense is only bad because they're on the field for so long, but I always counter with, the defense is on the field for so long because they're bad. Like I would hate for this team to go into this offseason thinking that the defense was fine. Everything that went bad was because the offense kept hanging them out to dry. That's not what happened for a vast majority of this season.
That's I see that presented to me too at times in my chat, Brendan, of the it's what they're doing is they're trying to apply that model we've often seen with good defenses, not just with the Hawks, but across the NFL, where you get into that late third quarter stage as a defense. You've had stop after stop throughout the day. Now you get worn down because your offense is just 3-and-out city all day long. And now the dam bursts and you give up a lot of yards and a lot of points. And the end game, you look really bad. But in actuality, you played a really good game through those first couple of quarters and being stifling. That's not, to your point, what's happening with the Seahawks defense this year. This was right out the gate, 3 straight scoring drives. The only reason they didn't have 4 straight scoring drives is they only had 35 seconds on the clock with no timeouts or one timeout at their 10-yard line at the end of the half. That's them just converting and going up the field constantly on you from the jump, from the get-go. There is no stifling point. There is no, well, we got them on this spot. You only caused 1 punt on the day. How can you not go to that as a team loss on this and come back to them? I've said there's not always a lot of times you go single stab, but it's one of the times you might just be able to do it where you're like 1 punt, you're losing the game. If my defense can't cause but 1 punt on a day, I almost don't need to see what anything on the offense. It's probably going to be an L. I would say 99 times out of 100.
Especially when you're punting on 4th and 1 from midfield.
Big balls, Pete.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that one in a little bit here. But so big picture, I want to ask you, with this current regime in place, with everything we've seen from the defense this year, and I would say last year as well, because that's when Clint Hurt got here, is there any amount of talent that can make this defense good? Because I talk about this all the time. The defense, the last time the Seahawks had a good defense, a top 10 defense, was 2016. It's been a long time. And the way I see it, we keep feeding more talent and more talent and more talent and more talent into it, and we're not seeing any results. Do you think there is any amount of talent that you could add to the defense this offseason or in any offseason that could actually get it on the right path, or is this all just completely helpless with this regime?
It's probably the most important question that this front office can be asking itself as it goes into this offseason, quite frankly, Brendan, because you do get to the point of, like you mentioned, you've spent all this money into the side of the ball already. And you go, well, we got to fix it. Well, what's the way to fix it? Spend even more money into that side of the ball. And what point is it that we're just getting the diminishing returns here, where the good money's getting thrown out with the bad? And I think that's very much a place that you could make an argument you've reached to on this spot. When I've paid the second amount most money onto this defense and I'm getting this kind of performance, there seems to be something more at the spine of this. It's more up the line than just merely the players downstream. And I'm going to myself be very hesitant on this, just start pointing at all the players on this and going, this guy, that guy, this is scheme issues, weak basis. We've pointed about, I've gone to specifics of it. We can talk about specifics of it. I'm sure we'll cover it on some of the shows of these are the things right here that are causing this defense to fail. Here. The 2-man fronts that they've been trying to run, which I watched Michigan run against Alabama. They ran a hell of a lot better than we've been running it. But they also are willing to blitz at times and bring those stacked fronts that, we don't often like to run with those 2-man fronts. They can work well because then you got guys sliding into the gaps in the blitz and it actually aligns well. But I think you can help this defense by adding some more talent, but I quite honestly think that you add 6-7% more talent this offseason, you bury more dollar bill assets into the defense, Brendan. You take it from ending out at a place that's right around 24th to ending out 19th. And then at what cost to come up those 4 or 5 spots moderately for then all you're going to have to dump to get the 7% push.
Right. And I honestly, there's a big part of me that just wants to say, if we're really going to go forward with this regime, then I want somebody to step in and be like, we don't spend $1 on defense this offseason. It's going to be bad no matter what. So everything goes into fixing this offensive line. Everything goes into fixing just the offense in general, but mostly the offensive line. That's the area that needs it. And we're building the defense out of day 3 picks, veteran minimum, UDFA. It's not going to make a difference. So why would I spend the additional dollars? Why would I spend the additional capital on it? Like, I would love to just have an offseason where the defense is completely ignored just to see if it can actually get worse, because I kind of don't think it can.
It's kind of hard to see how it will. I like your idea with this. I mean, especially if it's to invest in that offensive line, because at the least then you've actually helped your defense in a tangible way, because you have an offense that can run the ball consistently, run on anybody consistently, and therefore control the time of possession, and therefore not have a defense in burnout mode, as we're seeing right now with part of all the assets you put in. You've got it with a lot of guys, their tank is tapped out because they played probably far too many snaps over the course of the season. And so it could end up helping the defense in a roundabout way by going in that direction. And I think that's we'll see how much control really Schneider has in this puzzle if he does to take those steps, because there's some obvious needs for the interior of the offensive line. You're going to need a couple tight ends. This defense is what are you going to keep dumping in? Yeah, you re-sign Leonard Williams, but then what else are you going to do? You're going to put more, go buy more at that point, cut off of Jamal and then be sitting on his $10 million of dead money, but then go put more money. I don't know. I'm with you on it. To me, it's that whole sunk cost fallacy, man. I keep coming back to, and this feels like a little bit of that on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, since making that Leonard Williams trade, the Seahawks defense is by pretty much every metric the worst defense in the league. And like Leonard Williams has been great here. I'm not saying anything bad about Leonard Williams. He's been a great player for us. But there's part of me that's like, what is the point of keeping him around? Like, can it get worse? I guess technically it could, but is it going to get worse in a meaningful way? I'm not convinced it can. Yeah. So there's a part of me that's like, just let him go. Just, you wasted a draft pick. Just learn your lesson, or punish somebody for wasting the draft pick. How about that? And I don't know. We're going to have a discussion about this more in the offseason. I am wondering about that Leonard Williams thing. I am wondering if, yeah, he as a player is worth it, but is he worth it to this team right now?
Well, it's going to be a good discussion point on it. I will still say that I probably would lean to doing it, because when you sign Leonard Williams and bring him back here, a part of that is about, Brendan, the fact that there's the scarcity of the position that exists out there that you're going to need to address one way or the other, whether Leonard's here or nobody's here. And looking at this draft, looking at the guys that'll probably fall to our position, I think Leonard Williams surpasses the guys that I've scouted so far that we would land if we were even in the second round, which we were not. Say nothing of the third round, which he certainly is much better than those guys. So I understand a little bit of the hesitancy that might exist there with that. But like you said, he's not been the problem with this. It's been that you've had regression across the board at just about every other position on that front seven since he's arrived. And you also ended up playing a lot of top-notch offenses throughout that time. Not that the Steelers were. There's no excuse for that. But in this recent time, most of them have been pretty doggone good. So I think you still got to make the move to retaining him and bringing him back in. If they do let him go, Brendan, then you got to play the compensatory game, which means no free agents. You go make your trades to add on to your ball club at that point, so that at least you recoup something out of that deal with him.
Right. So before we leave the defense, this doesn't directly pertain to this game because he did not play in this game, but let's talk about the Jamal Adams thing a little bit, because I know you mentioned it a few minutes ago. I guess Pete said something that has some Seahawks fans it raised their hackles a little bit or something. It kind of made them like, uh-oh, what's going on here? So let's talk about that for a little bit here, because I know some people are concerned about that. But what was it that he said?
He's going to be back fine for next year. We're going to get him back. Then he just couldn't get back right to this year. He's essentially saying, almost like in a matter of fact fashion, that Jamal's coming back next season. I wouldn't expect him to come out and say, we're cutting Jamal, we're done. So, you came out at one point and said you're not trading Russell Wilson, and then a week later you trade Russell Wilson. So is there some of the cloak and dagger stuff here at play, which I think I'm expecting? Yes. If I'm laying money down in this situation, I still put down the money that they're going to cut Jamal and make him a post June 1st designation, and very shortly after the season ends. But that doesn't mean that they're not capable of making a stupid decision on this. And in my opinion, I think it is a stupid decision in retrospect, even coming back with Jamal this season. I didn't know the medicals in the long-term outlook on him and the way that this was going to play out. And to understand that this is really going to be a 2-year injury coming into the season, that we weren't going to get anything of normal Jamal, and that the true Jamal never may come back, that guy may never return back to what he was. That's to me one of those things of, why are you still holding that on the roster then for multiple years? If you know that that's the medical outlook when you came off the surgery last year, post June 1st designation, and move on. This team cannot seem to move on from things that do not work or not going to look to be working in the future. They hold on to that wish on a hope, wish on a shooting star kind of thought process on some of these players. And I feel bad for Jamal, but we got to do what's best for our roster as well. And if you made him a post June 1st designation, Brendan, could you have then gone and taken greater steps to address this defensive line so that you then didn't have to maybe make the Leonard Williams trade? That's why this stuff does impact other issues and other decisions. And why I say that I'm worried now about this is that you go back this next year now and you're going to have them sit on the cap and sit on cost us again the full meal deal. You're not going to be able to then save the $16 million you'd be able to save. $10 million, I think it is, this year's cap that you'd be able to save. No, 16. It's only $10 million.
It's 16 if it's post June 1st.
Right.
Pre June 1st is about 6, which honestly, I would not hate doing that. Just get it over with. I don't want this guy. I want this guy off my cap ASAP, but those would be the numbers.
Well, I think if you're going to go full on hit like that, then Brendan, then you got to commit to the next year's a rebuild year. You're not trying to compete. Then you're reestablishing the base of your culture and the base of your team. So that's really where that decision comes in, because that $16 million that you would save could be money very well spent in a couple of other areas to address very immediate concerns right now, rather than relying on those to be a draft pick that can hopefully develop immediately. I would say that the post June 1st is the way they probably go here, but you're right. It's possible that they don't post June 1st him, and then they cut him and they cut Quandre. And then I think you're at something like another 10 million with Quandre. So that'd be 16 million between the two of them. I think at that point that you're getting.
Yeah. Well,
if you went that route.
Yeah, we're doing it pre June 1st, and we're telling Pete that's coming out of your wallet. That's coming out of your defensive spending, man. You don't get to spend no money on the defense this year, because look what happened when we let you do it.
It's an incredibly bad bet to go back into Jamal next year on the books of the money that he's due to make, and to hope that he's coming back to his former self. You haven't put him in particularly good spots. You don't know how to blitz him. You put him back there too often in cover 2, and he gets exploited the second you do so. You don't really, if I'm going to a doctor right now and going, is he really coming back to 100%? Or am I getting like 92% Jamal? Am I getting like 93% Jamal? I think the doctor would say you're probably likely to more get the 93, especially considering all the other litany of injuries he had before he even got to the whole tearing the quad thing. So it's not a good bet. You have no cap space as it stands right now. I mean, I know I mentioned we have $2 million in cap space, but you basically have negative $5 million of functional cap space when you factor in the free agents that you're going to, or the draft picks you're going to need to sign, another couple million for the insurance reserve you're going to need on the roster. You're going to have to create cap space from somewhere, and there are only so many guys you can potentially go to here to clear out that space.
Well, I mean, I think Adams will be cut. I'm not really buying into what Pete said being meaningful. Like you said, the Russell Wilson quote, 2 years ago, we're not going to trade Wilson. A week later, we trade Russell Wilson. So
right.
That doesn't really mean anything. But did you were you ever into crypto?
I did dip the toe, but I didn't become a crypto bro.
Well, there's one thing that you learn in crypto. You do not take the loss until you've sold. Your wallet can get all the way down to 0.02% of its original value. All your investments can be at the bottom, but you haven't actually taken the loss until you sell. So maybe Pete's thinking, I got to hold onto this Jamal Adams thing because I haven't lost the trade until I cut him. Maybe that's the mentality here. I don't know.
I do, but then that's also where that works in crypto. But is that the really right approach for coaching and roster management?
Yeah.
And it's what works.
Well, it doesn't work in crypto either. That's what
okay.
That's what very desperate people say when they're trying to justify why their investment wallet has $8 in it when it originally had like 40,000.
So I'm with it then on that thought process where I just say, you're not gonna ever cash that token in. It's only probably going to continue to, lose value.
So I hope the team makes the right decision. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of cap space we can recreate. We can create this offseason.
Yeah,
there is. I mean, it really wouldn't be that bad. Adams, Diggs, you can make a decision on Dre'Mont. You make a decision on a guy like a Julian Love, even Jaron Reed. And Jaron Reed's been great here, but he's getting older. And if you're going to rebuild, what use does Jaron Reed really have? You could at least think about it. You've got Nick Bellore, Brian Monet, even a guy like an Eskridge. Like, you're suddenly up at like, whoa, we just created $50 million in cap space and gave up nothing of value. It's not that hard.
No, it's not that hard. They've got a lot of flexibility. That's why you've got to also determine, though, Brennan, and this is where the team needs to make a firm assessment of what they want to do here as we go forward. Are we truly going to try to get to a contender state here, or is it we don't have the buy-in we need across the board here on this roster, and so we need to, separate the wheat from the chaff, and that means that there's going to be a lot of this roster that's got to be turned over, or we got to go back to the roots of roster churn city a little bit. And if you're in roster churn city, then you're not looking to free up as much money, in my opinion. You're more about just getting your cap into a healthy stage as we get into the future. I know that's not exciting for people that would like to see the go for it. The go for it exists there too. Like you say, you can create a lot of space. It makes some big splashy moves out there to try to, juice up this roster a little bit.
Right. And look, I mean, you can have a lot of dead money and still field a pretty decent team. We did it last year. So you could eat that dead money and not say we're giving up this year. Cause I know Pete would never be okay with giving up on a year, and he probably shouldn't be. If you're a coach in the NFL, I don't think you should ever have the mentality of, I don't care if we win. Whatever. Let's throw away this season. Like maybe my front office can have that mentality, or my owner can have that mentality. I don't want my coach or my players to have that mentality. That's a very bad thing, I think.
Well, you bring up, that's why it's so important to have a general manager with autonomy, right?
Yeah.
When he actually has that ability, because what the coach wants is not always what's best for the organization in the long term.
Right, exactly. But you could eat a ton of dead money and still say we're going to try to compete this year, and you can do it. Another great example was the best post Legion of Boom defense the Seahawks have had, in my opinion, is 2018. 2018, that defense had no talent. It had Wagner, Clark, Jaron Reed playing out of position, and that's it. KJ Wright was injured. Earl Thomas was injured. They had Shaq Griffin and Trey Flowers starting at corner. They had Austin Calitro playing significant snaps. They signed Michael Kendricks out of the courtroom to play linebacker for a few games. And that defense was pretty okay. So you can build a decent defense out of spare parts. I've seen this team do it before. Sorry, there's no money in the banana stand this offseason. Sorry, Pete.
There's no money in the banana stand, Pete. It's been burned down.
Yep. All right. So that's about all I think that can be said about this defense. It's a pretty sad scene around here. It's pretty depressing. And I have kind of gone on record in saying I don't think we'll ever have a good defense with Pete as the head coach. We could have an average defense. We could have maybe a little above average. But in terms of the defense ever being good, I don't think it's ever going to happen.
No, because he's not evolving and modernizing his approach in any way. He's just holding on with a death grip to all of his old principles. And have they done some slight little variations to that can trick people into thinking changes have happened? Yeah, but those are slight variations to really the base philosophy, which is really well fleshed out into what he wants to do. And it seems to be a bit of an inhibiting philosophy at this point, rather than one that allows his players to go out there and really fly.
Right. Let's see here. Be calm, see clearly. Thank you for the $2. We've been mediocre for 6 to 7 years now.
Yeah. It's you got your since 2017, which my math is 7 years. You got one playoff win. I don't understand how we can continue to trot out we're consistent winners label. You got one playoff win since 2017. That's a long, and doesn't look like you're getting one this year unless things go real right this next week. So, I think middle of the road at the very least, if not mediocre, middle of the road. We've been stuck in this spot, and you and I have talked about many times. I think it's the worst place an organization can be is in the middle of the road, in between, not quite great, not quite bad, just stuck there in that middle in perpetuity.
Yeah. A couple weeks ago on X, I actually made a post comparing Pete Carroll's record over the last 9 seasons, including this one, which is every season since we lost the Super Bowl, to Jason Garrett, his entire career as the Cowboys head coach. Remarkably similar, very similar. I think Pete averaged half a win more per season. And he did make the playoffs, but Jason Garrett's thing was he always went 8-8, right? Jason Garrett always went 8-8 and missed the playoffs by 1 game. He did it 5 times.
Yeah.
Pete Carroll makes the playoffs by 1 game. That's the only difference, really. And it seems like a big difference because, there's a big difference between making the playoffs and not making the playoffs. But when you think about it in terms of like what's the difference between going 8-8 and 9-7, it's not really that big.
Yeah. And then Carroll also has that Super Bowl cachet to go with it, right? Because that always does come with those playoff appearances. And he got us to a Super Bowl 10 years ago, right? It kind of gets anchored. Whether it should or shouldn't, it does get anchored to the other one.
Yeah.
When you do
and
go.
That kind of cuts the other way too. Jason Garrett took over a terrible team from Wade Phillips, whereas Pete Carroll at that point was working on a team that had just gone to back-to-back Super Bowls. He was working from a much better position of strength.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed completely.
And I made fun of the Cowboys nonstop for keeping Jason Garrett when they kept him for like 5 years. He was there 5 years longer than he needed to be, probably. So if I'm going to make fun of another team for keeping Jason Garrett, I'm not going to be happy when my team decides to keep Jason Garrett 2.0 or whatever that.
Jason Carroll?
Yeah, Jason Carroll. Like, what's the difference? Not much at all. By the way, Jason Garrett beat Pete Carroll in the playoffs one time, actually. Yeah, we don't like that. No. Let's see here. Taker, thank you for the $5. Brendan, you had to remind us about Brandon Roy. Throw Greg Oden in there too. Hell, those two even now could play on our defense. Yeah, this is referring to a video I posted a few hours ago. I was talking about Abe Lucas and the knee stuff, which would you be cool talking about the Abe Lucas stuff now? Because that is only tangentially related to the offensive performance against the Steelers, but it's a conversation that needs to be had because he left that game right around halftime and did not come back. And we've already been told is unlikely to play this week because I think Pete put it like he's got no drive in his knee. Like the knee is okay, but he's not generating power when he comes out of his stance. So therefore he's not going to be able to play. So this is now officially a problem. And knees don't typically just get better, right? Like once the knee goes, it just kind of keeps going, right?
Typically, you have some tales of players being able to find, a little bit of footing, and then they'll get a couple year run, and then it comes back up and starts to rear its head again. The thing that I don't like about it is that we just don't really know what is happening with it. We hear him reference words like chronic, and he can't get can't get the push from the power standpoint of things. But what's going on with the knee? Is it bone on bone? Is there no cartilage? Is there a tear that he's going to need to have repaired? This has gone back to last year. I think it's unfortunate that I'm already looking at the offensive line as the biggest priority here that we need to deal with. And I love what Stone Forsythe's brought. You're going to get another rookie year. And he was very good, I thought, in this game, despite what the PFF score said. But you may have to do a little bit more than that here. And this is one of the reasons I do really like drafting one of those three guys that we've talked about very often, is that all three of those guys that we've talked about, Cooper Bebe, Graham Barden, or Tony Fontanu, can all play tackle. So now you have a starting left guard in place, and then you also have a guy that can kick out there to the right tackle if the chronic knee injuries continue to persist for Abraham Lucas. And I like that aspect of it. I think you should plan for that a little bit now as we go forward, because this is 2 straight seasons where it's come back and bit us a bit.
Do you think that there would be any less stress on his knee, on Abe Lucas's knee, if he moved inside to like right guard? That's one theory that people have tossed around.
It's worse because
that's kind of what I've thought. Yeah,
he's 6'7". He's legit 6'7" tall, 6'6", 6'6", and a half. 6'6" and change. And the problem those guys have, the reason that you don't see in NFL a proliferation of 6'6" guards across the board, but that they're actually a rarity, is because it's very hard for them to bend. You have to win the leverage war inside from the interior of that offensive line. And the only way you accomplish the leverage war is by getting lower than the man across from you. How do you get lower from the man across from you when he's 6'3" and you're 6'7"? You got to bend. You got to get low. And that's anybody that's had a knee injury, hell, I'm dealing with one old man knee injury right now that's like started acting up all of a sudden. That's when you feel it, is when you bend down. Whereas tackles, right, Brendan, they get to do more of, they're more in this type of stance at times. How they can even put that one arm down like this to where you can give yourself some relief on your legs when you do it. So you're not in as much of the same stance. There's times you got to go down on from the tackle position, but you're also matching up with guys now that are more likely to be 6'5", maybe even 6'6" out there, where it's a little easier to get the leverage war one from the outside than it would be on the end. I have never bought that Lucas was going to be slid into guard and that's the answer for him. He might be able to play it well for a while, but his best position is tackle.
Right, because one thing I brought up in the video today, this is a great draft for offensive tackles.
Hmm.
And obviously, not all of them are going to play on the right side, but some of them are. Like Latham, I think, is a right tackle, right?
He is. That's right.
Is Mims left or right? Amarius Mims.
I believe he is. Let me check my notes on that. Mims is a right tackle.
Yeah, Mims, right tackle. You've got
Fuanga,
Fuaga. I think Blake Fisher, he's a later round guy, but he's intriguing. He's interesting.
I got him as a second right now.
And there's one other guy. I think it's the BYU guy, Kingsley something. No, BYU. Yeah, BYU Kingsley something. He's got a really long, weird name that I can't pronounce.
Right. I haven't
There's
had a chance to
him.
see him.
There's the Houston guy. God, I can't remember some of these names because I haven't looked at
We're
tackles
just
that
getting
much
into
this
him.
year.
I haven't
Yeah.
either gotten too much into them because they're like with corners, like one of those. I'll get around and probably last because there's so many other positions we're going to want to concentrate on to know for sure. But
Yeah.
there's good ones out
So
there in this one.
my point being that if you're gonna need to replace Abe Lucas sooner rather than later because this knee issue won't go away, this draft is a great time to do it.
Mhm.
So you kind of got to make a call now, and if you make the wrong call, that hurts. So what do you think? What would you do? How would you treat the right tackle situation going into this offseason?
Well, the beauty of trusting the draft board from a value standpoint, which the Seahawks have proven they're willing to do recently, means that you get to if they get back into the second round or with one of their third round picks, if they're landing there and the best value on their board is a tackle on the board, they'll go with that because they're leaning into value above all else, not how the roster is currently constructed, how they need to fill those holes in from the draft around that. And it's a very different ideology than the one they applied, I think, here for years. So that will open that door up to them going out there and picking the guy. And that would be what I would do. Like I said, I think that if I was looking at the Hawks strategy of predicting what Schneider would do, if I thought he looked at this ideally of how he'd like to run this draft, is that he moves back in the first round. We find ourselves 15 to 18-ish. He puts himself up around 26, 27, finds maybe a way to package even a later round pick to get back up into the second round. He takes one of those top 3 left tackle, left guard types that I just talked about that have that flexibility. He's then got that insurance policy taken care of while he's also dealt with one part of his offensive line on the interior side of it. And then he gets his native picks back along with potentially still the 2 third-round picks if he's able to do, the trade back out of the 1 and flip a 4 and, get back a 2 from the other team. They do one of those kind of convoluted kind of trades like that. I could see them trying to pull something like that along the lines. And that's what I'd actually like to see as well, in addition to that.
Let's say the Seahawks it looks like they're not going to be picking that low enough to where this is realistic. But let's say they have a pick and BPA is Fuaga. How would you feel about taking him, who is more just kind of a pure right tackle?
Yeah, I'm okay with that because he's a first round talent and that's appropriate value. And again, I just think I'm guessing here, I'm just guessing there's something with Lucas as far as problematic wise with the knee and that this is going to act up on a yearly basis. And if that's the case, it doesn't bring me happiness to say it, but that means you got to find a tackle to lock this in because we need to get this offensive line on point. I like Stone, but he has limitations out there for how well he has played this year. There's things he can't do on the field, especially from the right tackle position, that you need to have within your offense, especially when it comes to let's say the ground game.
Yeah. So you would be okay with implementing a strategy to replace Lucas in the near future, even if it costs a first round pick?
Yeah, but I also think with Fuanga, I can kick him inside. Like he can be kicked inside. I don't think Lucas can at his size, but I know Fuanga is a pretty big dude as well. But I think he's physical enough. You could get away with him at left guard or at right. So I'd be okay with that. Yeah.
Yeah. If the Seahawks are picking in like the mid teens and Mims or Latham is BPA when their pick comes up, how do you feel about that?
Again, both those guys I think are 6'4", rocked up, 315, and they can move. If I got to bop them inside, they've got the horsepower to get it done in there, and get it done well. They're beasts. They're good enough players, and I think that there's a lot of fluidity between tackles that are legit NFL tackles to being able to kick inside and play guard if they've got the physicality and the mean streak to do it, where they're not the finesse tackle, that they just want to be out there dancing all day. And those guys have that. They've got the mean streak where they'll get in there. They're on teams that'll run the ball, that'll and they'll stick their nose in there and give it to you. So they've got enough natural talent to be able to do it. Is their best position long-term? Maybe not, but to put your best possible offensive line together next year with Lucas, if he is healthy, God willing, that would be maybe the best route to go as far as to build up that most strongest line for the season.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's see here. Save the Geese. Thank you for the $4.99. Defense can't get worse, so yeah, let's build up this O-line. Tired of them not going all in on either side in the draft or free agency. Fire Pete. I mean, they took steps, but they got to keep going. Like the Cross Lucas draft was great. I think Oluwatimi and Bradford were nice day 3 pickups, but they got to keep going. They got to keep pushing it. And I mean, we see these teams that invest heavily in the offensive line constantly, and occasionally they end up with kind of a wasted pick, like the Saints taking Trevor Penning. But overall, I don't think they're unhappy with their general strategy of like attacking the offensive line as often as possible.
You touch on the most important point of all what you just said there at the end, is that when you look at the teams that have invested in the offensive line, it's very rare that you go back to that team in retrospect after the season and they're going, man, we just put too much into that offensive line this year. We just didn't feel the returns of that. Very, very rare that you hear that. Most of them are like, well, that was that was smart. That was the right way to go with this. And I'm a big believer in it at this point. It's something that you look at the interior of this offensive line. While you say Oluwatimi, Bradford are good, those weren't guys that were going to set the world on fire from where they're being selected. You need to go and get something more legitimate, and you don't just take it up to the bare minimum. You don't just take it up to, well, we got our starters here. You go, okay, hey, Oluwatimi can fight it out with the center I bring in this house. Bradford can fight it out with the legit right guard I'm going to bring in this house. Not that I'm just giving these guys this starting platform of a position and saying, here, it's yours. I think that's where some of the problems come in this organization recently. Not enough of competition being king and too much of this guy slated to start here, rather than getting really good competition between two guys and let the best man win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think when Wilson was here, there was a fear that if you built a great offensive line, he would kind of not utilize it to its full ability. That's not the case anymore, I don't think.
No.
I think very clearly Gino's a guy who, you give him a great offensive line, you're going to see big results, a big improvement in the results.
Amen.
I mean, this year he's remained relatively productive with a really bad pass protecting offensive line. Last year, it was at least a little bit better than this, and he made the Pro Bowl. He won Comeback Player of the Year. So I think if you gave him an elite offensive line, he would, I'm not going to say be in the MVP race, but I think he'd get a few votes.
You're going to get even better production than you got of this year, or consistent to what you got last year, Brendan, if you give him one of two things. Give him a line that can either run block up front and actually create some holes, or, which will make him great off the play action, because he's awesome under center play action. He's very good on throws out of that type of stuff. Or, as you just said, give him the great pass protection. Or, God forbid on this, we give him both. What happens then to the offense if these two ailing parts of the offense for years now being an ability to consistently create holes, right? And then also now having an line that can pass protect at the same time. Imagine what we would see from this offense. And I think they could soar at that point. And I think it's a good approach this offseason for them to lean in that direction if I was the front office.
Mm-hmm. Michael Cam, sorry. Thank you for the $8. Should the Huskies coach Kalen DeBoer be considered for the head coaching job if Pete is dismissed? You stay away from Kalen DeBoer, okay?
Don't you touch my Kalen. Don't you touch my Kalen.
Stay away. You stay away. Also, that's interesting, right? I don't know. I mean, maybe. I mean, if we're just being completely objective here, some of these college coaches don't translate. Some of them do. I like him for sure, of course. I mean, I love him, but you never know sometimes with these guys.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I'm open to it. I think the job that he's done with the Huskies has been mightily impressive, because he's taking this team now as far as they've been taken since Don James. That's 30 years. I mean, that's bar none right there. That's got to stand out to you, because what you've seen is how hard it is to win at the University of Washington in that 30-year time frame. You had Peterson and Lambright come in with a little bit of success, but between those guys, absent that, there was some darkness in there for this Husky program. Some of it caused by the Pac-10 and the sanctions they brought down. But the job he's done has got to be noticed in that way. And I do like about Kalen DeBoer is that when I watch his defense, I mean, just the little thing they did that was straightforward and easy for them this game against Texas, for instance, Brendan, where you end up with Texas in a position of 3rd and 9, 3rd and 12s, right? Our defense would say, okay, let's run with our 4-man front, and then we're going to drop all of our guys back into coverage and squeeze zones. His defense instead, with watching the Texas tape, brings those stack fronts up to the line of scrimmage, right? Knowing that the Texas seem to have a call in play that if they get those stack fronts with Quinn Ewers, he's going to throw the bubble screen at that point. That it's almost like an auto call. And they went to it like 4 times over the game, stack fronts to the bubble screen on 3rd and 9s, and forced that to happen. And what was happening is they were dropping out of the stack fronts after it to go rally to go tackle the bubble screen guy. Whereas the calls made, like the blitz is just coming pure. Nobody's dropping out of it. And that's that confusion I love when you get those. So Kalen brings everything that I would love to bring: a modernized offense with motion and misdirection and showing you some cheese here. Well, it's going to be over here. And then defensively being willing to be multiple, willing to run some man-based principles, willing to blitz, willing to make it uncomfortable for the opposition's offense. He has a defense there that, I think is playing above itself at times, has some good players on it who are going to be some NFL caliber players as well. But he's getting the most out of them. And I like these as signs from a head coach. Certainly he keeps doing this job. He's not going to last UW for very long if he keeps putting this kind of work together.
Yeah. Initially, I think there was a little bit of concern that he would be another Lincoln Riley, a guy who doesn't care about defense at all. That doesn't seem to be the case. This defense has actually been really impressive in the second half of the season. And like you said last night, there are bad moments. There are definitely bad moments, but there's also some really good stuff out there. And it's not a blue chip defense at all. It doesn't have blue chip talent whatsoever. So
but they fly around. You don't have to question whether that's a bought in defense. They, like I said, schematically, they get the most out of those guys, and they create confusion for the opposition. They tackle Brendan. That stands out to me. He's got that defense tackling across the board. I've been very impressed by Kalen DeBoer.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it would happen this off. Well, if the Huskies win the national title, you cannot go out on a higher note than that. Maybe he goes to the NFL at that point.
It's possible. He's going to get He's going to get calls. I mean, I'm sorry, he is. This kind of job to put this together, not just for the University of Washington, but anybody on the West Coast. Look at how hard it is on the West Coast to get a team to the national title game.
I don't want Ryan Grubb as our head coach next year, though. I don't like him.
Oh, who knows? Maybe they trot somebody out super exciting out on the other side if they do. But
I was actually really concerned that Texas A&M was going to get him because of all their oil money, but luckily they. Who did they hire? Who did they end up with? They ended up with somebody. I can't remember who, but I was very relieved about that.
They did pluck somebody, didn't they? They stole somebody from somewhere. I forget where it was though, too. Yeah, they ended up getting somebody that they were able to pilfer. But I was glad on that one too.
Mike Elko.
Yeah. I was glad to hear that though too. And good on Kalen staying. I think best for him to stay here or go to the NFL. I'd be looking if I was in his perspective. I wouldn't try to be bouncing around between college programs. Just keep upwardly ascending. And boy, you watch his coaching pedigree. Like he's just small job, better job, Huskies. And it's all 2 years. They were showing it on the telecast. You're going, man, every 2 years he's moving up the chain.
Yeah, and I mean, if you want to go out on top, it's very unlikely the Huskies are going to have as much to work with as they did next year, right? Like our QB is going to be Will Rogers, who that's fine, but he's not going to be as good as Penix, I don't think. I doubt it anyway. You're going to lose Odunze, I guess is actually how you pronounce it.
Odunze.
Yeah, you're going to lose that. You are going to get to keep probably McMillan and Polk. You're going to keep Dylan Johnson probably, but you're losing Fatanu. So maybe it's like, okay, let's get out now while I'm at the top because next year it's not going to be as good.
They might kill it on the transfer portal stuff, though. They might end up getting a bunch of dogs on that. That's become almost more important than the recruiting classes themselves because you got the ready-made players now coming to the program and they can just assimilate. But it might be. I mean, it's harder to go, like you said, out on a higher high, especially if they can go out there and get the win. You're going to have a harder time getting a brighter moment in college football as far as a way to kind of put your exclamation point in your career in college football to move on to the next level at that point.
Okay, so national championship game next week. Winner gets hired by the Seahawks, Harbaugh or DeBoer. How about that?
I'd be happy with either one, man. I would be excited by either one. I am ready to kind of get to something new, I think, at this point. And those guys would bring they would check a lot of the boxes I'm looking for and what I want to see from a new head coach coming into the house, and very few negatives.
Yeah. Seahawks OG, thank you for the $1.99. Steve Emptman. Arg.
You ever go back and watch any old tape on Edmund?
I've seen him play. Yeah.
What a monster, dude. What an
Yeah.
absolute, the most dominant defensive tackle I've seen at the college football level, surpassing a Warren Sapp. Any guy, Big Daddy Dan Wilkerson, you can bring any name you want to bring to the table. He's got him beat by leaps and bounds, man. Teams would triple team him, and they couldn't block.
For me, the number one was always Namkada Suh in college. He was just unfair.
This guy was better though. He was every bit, if not stronger than Ndamukong, and he had quickness on top of it. Like he was just an obliterating machine up front.
Yeah. Pretty incredible stuff. Really too bad how it worked out there.
Yeah. Drafted higher than Suh too. Number 1 overall pick in the draft.
A tragedy.
Very much so. That stupid AstroTurf. That was I was at the time it was kind of well known at that time how bad it was. And that was just one of those ones where it was like, man, it got Warner. Now it's getting Empman.
Ugly. Be calm, see clearly. Thank you for the $2. Pete drafted Lucas. So is this new? Yeah, I was thinking about this a little bit recently because I remember in the pre-draft, we were doing pre-draft shows, a bunch of them before the 2022 draft. You and me both thought Lucas was going to be a first-round pick.
I did.
He fell to the 3rd. So at the time, I was like, wow, that's awesome. We just pulled off a big one right there. Was there maybe some medical stuff there that drove teams away from taking him in the 1st and 2nd rounds, you think?
Well, it certainly didn't add up where the evaluation looked pretty cleanly as far as there being a first round evaluation. And I've talked to other people that are outside of our sphere of Seattle that had looked at Lucas, and maybe fans of other teams that also saw him in a similar light. I think that does point to there had to have been something extra on it that caused teams to be hesitant with him, especially because it's such a position of importance, Brendan. And if you remember, it was also a position, if I remember correctly, there weren't a lot of tackles in that particular draft. So, I think that there's a chance that this could be the case. I heard of no medical problems with them, and usually this stuff gets leaked. For instance, last year, Darnell Washington, many of you guys wanted him taken as a tight end by the Hawks, but we got reports out in that draft that he had a ticking time bomb in his knee, and that's why he slipped and dipped. So that was not the case with Lucas, in that it was reported that way, but it does seem to be, if you're trying to kind of put together why he dropped as he did, this is kind of seems to be the case. Would seem to be the case.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to say, if that is the case and the Seahawks drafted him knowing there was this risk, I'm totally cool with that because it was a 3rd round pick. Yeah. Like, I want to be clear, this is not me trying to say, oh, fire John and Pete because they drafted Lucas in the 3rd round. No, you take that risk in the 3rd round all day.
All day. I've got no issue with that in the 3rd round. No, not for that upside, not for 1st round upside. 3rd round pick, 1st round upside with the risk. I'm okay with that.
Also, be calm, see clearly. Thank you yet again for the $2. Kalen equals moxie, toughness, and competition. I can get behind that.
Certainly 3 things that I saw on the football field yesterday and throughout this season. Be calm. I'd agree 100%. I'd see that from his team as well. And these are things that I long for and what I'd like to see from my team. So if you're able to get that brought aboard, great. And part of what Kalen's done here is he's done a multitude of things really well to get this Husky program. That's what makes what he's done so impressive. Isn't just, he's bringing this cutting edge scheme that's just nobody's got an answer for, or it's just he's got the miracle quarterback making it happen. It's that he's bringing an assembly of a lot of strong parts in his philosophy together to make this team go and what they do. And that part you can recognize this point. And this is how they've had the success. This is how, Brendan, they've been in back into the season. I think every single game for the last 7 games has been a 1-score game. And I think they're the first team since 1973 to win every single one of those 1-score games in that they were in that way. And that just speaks to that moxie, I guess, like you say, and resiliency and never quit kind of attitude, which is certainly a kind of, team tends to fit the identity of the coach. And that seems to be the case here.
Yeah. One way I put it in my video after the Pac-12 title game was winning is a habit. Losing's a habit, but winning can be a habit too. Mm-hmm. And I think winning just kind of became a habit for this Huskies team because they would play bad games. They would play awful games. They would play atrocious games. They would have games where their best players didn't show up. They would have players where players completely messed up, but they kept winning. At a certain point, you're just like, you would have sworn that the Huskies were going to live and die on the arm of Michael Penix in every single game. But there were games where Penix didn't even play good and they still won. There were games where the defense would get gutted and they still won. There would be games where, this guy wouldn't show up, that guy wouldn't show up, the offensive line would no show, and they always won. And I think that's maybe the highest compliment you can pay a coach. He's made winning a real habit here.
He has. Yeah. And that's why you'll hear the label applied to certain people, be it a coach or be it a player. He's a winner. He's just a winner. It's that intangible thing that isn't always easy to discern in their physical ability or what they're doing on the field, but you just sort of feel it. And that times get tough, they get steady. When everyone else is getting nervous, their hand gets calm, and they're able to carry the day through and bring it home. And they just have that sort of killer instinct inside them to be able to capture it. And it's unique. Not all teams, not all coaches, not all players have that inside them.
Right, absolutely. So I would agree with all that. Okay, so I think we're caught up now. So let's talk about this offense a little bit now. We already talked about the Abe Lucas thing, so I'm glad we were able to resolve that, because that's going to be one of the most difficult things to decide on this offseason.
Absolutely.
But to talk about the offense, this is the side of the ball where actually a lot went right. There was actually quite a bit to like in this game. I thought Geno played great until the fumble. I was really impressed with him in the pocket. I was really impressed with what he was doing with an offensive line that was not really helping him out. I thought that Geno did his thing for a vast majority of that game. I thought the run blocking started out really good. There was actually some stuff going on with Walker with run blocking that impressed me, unlike pretty much any other game this year. But most importantly, I think this offense looked like something like the Rams might run. We were throwing the ball over the middle of the field. We were running the ball to the outside. Like, there were a couple of carries in the red zone, 2 carries in a row to Walker, where he took the ball off tackle. There in the one play where I think he took the ball right to the boundary. And I was like, this actually looks like a Sean McVay offense. It went away a little bit later, but that was mostly because the offensive line got injured. But I was like, man, where was this?
Yeah, I saw the same thing, especially in the utilization of the middle of the field and the intermediate passing game. And Noah Fant came alive for the first time in many different weeks in this game, and it was on the back of hitting him right there up the seam. I mean, on one thing, the very first catch he had was right on top of the seam, and I was like, "Yes, a seam pass, let's go."
Yep.
So it was great to see them attack that way. They showed you where there could be some success in there. When you look, there wasn't a lot of when they attacked in the middle of the field. There wasn't a lot of like things that supposedly Coach Carroll worries about on this stuff, which would be like turnover worthy plays. You were pretty safe in there when you threw the ball in there, and it was great to see them attack in that way. Like you say, would have loved to have seen this in week 2, but better late than never, I suppose, on that. And Walker, like you said, had some good runs early on. There were the holes. That touchdown run, especially Damian Lewis and Charles Cross, absolutely landed their blocks perfectly. DK sealed the deal on that run. I mean, Walker kind of went almost in untouched. That's what you'd love to see more of from him. I maintain, after a game like this with Walker, and after watching many games of Walker this year, if you give him an offensive line, this guy's going to go get 1,600 yards in a season. He'll bust off the 60, 70-yard runs a couple times over the course of a year. Get him the blocking. Get the most out of this kid as you can right now. And he's doing so much at times, and he had to do it later on in this game, Brendan, with early penetration and getting hit in the backfield. And that's happened too often this year, regardless of the opponent that we've played. Get him some blocking, and this kid can really be a big linchpin of this offense. And with it, allow you to control the clock, and with it, allow you to move the chains a little bit easier. And we'll see if they do so this offseason. But I thought he played a really good game.
Yeah, really impressed with him. And he's playing hurt, by the way. There's no way he's 100%.
Yeah. How do you like, by the way, the call where you see him on the sideline with his arm? You're like, okay, he's having a hard time raising his arm. Like, the guy's holding his arms, like, so there's a problem in the shoulder situation. Then they come back and they decide they're going to do a direct snap to him out of shotgun. Wasn't a big fan of that one.
That was where Waldron did lose me a little bit.
Yeah, that was going, come on, buddy. Look over on the thing. He's barely got the guy holding his arm up, like,
yeah,
bail him out a little bit here.
Yeah, there was definitely some good stuff from Waldron in this game. Overall, I think he called a pretty good game, but the trickeration we were trying was very, very bizarre. And I don't really know what to say about it. But in general, I don't mind stuff like that. Just maybe not with your backup center and running back who can't use his arms.
Yeah, can't lift his arm up over his chest without help. But yeah, I did. I think Waldron overall had a good game plan, mainly like you said, because it looks a little bit more closer akin to the a kind of Ram style of offense of what you would see, which I liked, and using that inside middle of the field, not ignoring it, and just keeping everything to the outside of the numbers. And they were fairly consistent for the most part throughout. You know, they didn't play perfectly, but they're okay. I will say too, I didn't have as much issue on the Geno strip play at the end because he's got the chip block going to the blind side on the back.
Right.
And as a quarterback, when I drop back, I just feel like if I'm sitting in that scenario, I need to count on I can't see behind me and you're getting help. I need to know you're going to give me 3 seconds. You know, you can give me 3.5 seconds. Maybe he's going to be able to still create some quick early pressure there, but you're getting some help there. You shouldn't have that pass rush win happen in that case if you're cross. And as a quarterback, that's hard. I don't have eyes in the back of my head. I got to just feel that on the backside. And that's a lot of feet pounding between Charbonnet, Cross, and Herbert going through there to determine, is he getting through or not getting through here as that guy's coming around the other edge. We saw Geno do so well in that game, Brendan, with pocket mobility when he was seeing it come at him and he could then navigate and move around it, which is, I think, almost beyond the throws he made in this game. And he made some really good throws. His pocket navigation was, I think, maybe the best thing about him in this game, and getting away from pressure, getting away from TJ Watt at times with just a simple step up, 2 steps here, 2 steps there, and being efficient, not having to feel like I go scramble like a crazy chicken with your head cut off kind of thing. You can just a couple steps, the guy's going to fly right by.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the same stuff we saw from Penix last night, right? Penix was phenomenal in the pocket last night,
Yeah.
and I think Geno showed similar stuff. In fact, I can kind of see why some people do draw the comparison between Geno and Penix, other than the fact that they throw with a different arm.
Yeah.
They have a lot in common. They really do.
They do. Yeah, I think their mobility is very equivalent. Penix showed you those legs. I think Geno showed you in this game. You know, he came out with that run with, like, he's got legs. He can move. Use them. And he also brought that into play in this game in a way that he's been hesitant. Locke's been hesitant to utilize at times this year. He's got the legs to get it done as well on that side of it, which he showed. But yeah, we get caught up at times with mobility and scramblers. Sometimes it's almost more of the important skill is that pocket mobility of not only moving in the pocket, but then keeping the eyes up the field to be able to then keep, it's hard to do. It's that chew gum and, or walk or roll your, that whole thing at the same time. It's hard to do 2 things at once. So it's just having that ability to, he would get out of that first thing. Eyes would still be up, quick trigger, ball comes out on time and right on the right spot to the receiver down the football field. He was tremendous in this game in a couple of different respects. So not perfect, but I was really, really impressed by what Geno did out there in this game.
Yeah, I was very, very happy with him. And I mean, him only getting sacked once in this game with how many pressures we gave up is obscene. Like I think Cross alone, according to PFF, gave up 9 pressures in this game.
Yeah.
And Lucas gave up 4 and he only played half the game.
Yeah, that's not good. And that's been a commonality of Geno throughout this year. And what's happened at times, Geno, is that there's times where the pressure gets to him, Brendan, and he does get sunk by it at times, as many quarterbacks in this league would. But what's part of why I think you and I both get really up on Geno is understanding what he's had to work against as far as those detriments go. But then also the fact that you have games like this one, or you have games like the Cowboy game, where he's under this onslaught of pressure, and yet he is still performing. He might not have a running game like he did with the Cowboys, yet he is still performing. Snap after snap. You're still getting the ball out there. You're still putting dimes down the football field. I'm not saying the guy's some best quarterback in the sport, but I think he has been very impressive when you factor all of this in and don't just think of it through the vacuum of, good quarterback, bad, but take into these associating parts that are at play here. And it does make it impressive.
Yeah. If we have a good game against the Cardinals, our offense is going to end up ranked 16th or so in the league in points, which is dead bang on average, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much exactly average with this abysmal offensive line. That's actually kind of a phenomenal accomplishment for a quarterback, I think. I'm down with it. And there are going to be some conversations we have this offseason about Geno Smith that some people are not ready for, but I am.
Yeah, he gets, and I know we'll get a couple comments off this video, I'm sure, just that he has his people that don't like him, and I get that. But, there's a lot of there to show you that this guy's got some quality brings. Doesn't mean he's the answer in the future. Both you and I have advocated for still going out and drafting a quarterback in this draft. But as a guy in the here and now, until we can get to that quarterback and who can, do some things, if you provide him the right support and cast around him, I feel pretty good about what we got here with what he brings. And he's not the problem. We got so many other issues and things that we can deal with to correct that. Not only will he do his end of the bargain, but he'll even get better when you fix those other things.
Mm-hmm. Right. So pretty happy about that part of it. Metcalf, really good game from him, I thought. On the drop, by the way, he had already been led out of bounds. That was Geno just throwing it a little too far out where DK had no chance to make a play on it. I don't care about that. I also don't care about the holding call. Like, sometimes that's just going to happen. I'd rather have him trying to block out there as much as possible and occasionally picking up a holding call than just not blocking.
Right.
Like, that's an easy trade-off for me.
You saw it in the Texas game last night with the right tackle on the one play where Ewers broke the pocket, and he's got the same grip DK had in the game and his block down the field. Yeah. And you've got to sense that guy getting out your outside shoulder to then release it. And it's one of those things we saw for years with guys when Russ would break the pocket like that, and you'd have Jermaine Ifedi get that penalty. That was his special. He'd always want to pull the guy back in. Don't let him go. Don't let him get to the outside of my QB. It's hard. It's a hard bang thing to let go of in that moment. But I can't. To me, it's not an issue with DK. He's trying to block hard. That blocking hard earlier in the game got you a touchdown with Kenneth Walker. There is the upside to what that brings on it too. And I just love how he blocks. I don't want to have him back anything off in that part of it.
Mm-hmm. JSN only one catch, but it was a beautiful one over the middle of the field yet again, back of the end zone. Love it.
Great throw, ballsy throw by Geno, putting that one up over the top, middle of the field with so many guys back there in coverage. And I'm okay in a game like this where JSN doesn't get features as much because you had a little bit of ability to run the ball. There are so many playmakers in this offense that there's going to be guys who have silent games. And with Fan having a little bit more use in the middle of the field, this one, that might have been a little bit of the less targets that then went to JSN on the reverse side of that. So I'm okay with that at the end of the day with where Jackson was and their production was on this one. That'll happen. There's only so many balls to go around, especially when you have the Steelers offense, compacting the game with the time of possession and how much they're running the ball and burning the clock.
Yeah. Noah Fant, end of season contract push, maybe, like just reminding everybody, hey guys, I'm available.
Somebody out there is going to pay him. I don't think it's going to be us, but somebody out there will give him the goods.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've always liked Fant. I've always thought it was too bad we couldn't quite figure out how to utilize him to the best of his abilities. But he's a nice little player, and it's good to see him get involved here a little bit at the end of the year.
Me too. Yeah, I think he's going to get a contract somewhere, probably about $10 million a year on a 3-year deal or something like that. I'm sure. Right. So, and he's earned his way to get that deal here.
I agree. I want to ask you, Evan Brown goes out of this game about halftime with a concussion. So we get about a half to look at Oluwatimi. What did you think? Did you feel strongly about Oluwatimi's performance?
Not really. I mean, he went out there and I think he didn't really provide much sizzle or flash. He did a little bit better in pass protection than in run blocking, but neither was at a top-notch level. That was right about the times that the holes started to close down for Kenneth Walker. And you did run a couple of times over his side. So there wasn't a lot there that he showed me on what he brought to the table on his 25 snaps. Most of it was in pass protection. So he only had 4 run blocking snaps technically. So there wasn't a lot of him running, but he didn't do a lot with that. He looked okay in the pass protection. He was all right back there. I think he had 1 bad snap, but it was, he had 50 rating PFF. He was just kind of out there.
Yeah. So decent chance we see him again this week because Evan Brown got a concussion and those can definitely take longer than a week to clear up. But as of right now, you're not really, it doesn't seem like you're feeling too great about the possibility of him being long-term solution on this offensive line as a starter, right?
Well, the unfortunate part here, Brendan, comes that you didn't give him a run of games in that out throughout the season to see if you could make that determination. We have to make this determination blind right now because you've decided to marry yourself to Evan Brown throughout the course of this year, who's like Austin Blythe before him, kind of played at about a 32nd ranked level at the position in the sport.
Right.
So if he's not setting that kind of benchmark of play that you can't overcome easily with your rookie center from Michigan to go out there and play, why not try out the rookie from center from Michigan to see what he is and what he can do? We decided not to do that. I do find that a little bit strange, but that also doesn't allow me to be at the spot where I know I can just count and ride with Oluwatimi going into the future. I'd like to think I could. I like the kid a lot. I think he's a fit for the offense, but he's only played a smattering of snaps throughout the course of this game. We'll see how he plays in this next game at the Cardinals. Maybe that'll give us a little bit more of an indication, but I just don't think you're going to need to get another center anyway with Brown being a free agent. And why not go out there and get a guy that can push him at that point would be my opinion. And maybe the guards are going to be harder to grab. Maybe this right tackle you got to go get, and just there's only so many things you can address. But I would hope the team doesn't just go, well, it's Oluwatimi and 6th round, Matt Frazier or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Again, it's just going to be hard. The upshot is if you address these other positions, right guard is pretty easy. Like right guard, like it'll fall into place if you really take care of the tackles, left guard, and center. Right guard's really not that hard. Like you're not going to have to make some massive investment there to make that work well too. You can have kind of one guy who gets covered for a little bit by everybody else. My fear would be starting too many rookies in one year, like having your entire interior offensive line started by rookies. That's a little bit of a dicey proposition, even if they're good rookies, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's where you could definitely, in free agency, to tend to go find that interior offensive lineman that can come in to be that guy. But you got to give up the goods to get it, or go make the trade for it. And the team at times have wanted to go down the road of like a Gabe Jackson type or a DJ Fluker type of the position, which is to go get the veteran, but you're getting the veteran that has really not much left in the tank, and they're not really giving you a whole lot. So they're veteran-y, but they're not really very ability driven in what they're bringing. And that's more, I think, of what we need at this point is guys that can get the job done and actually have some tools. So it'll take the investment, but this is where we come to making a priority or not making it a priority. Like you say, leading away from a defense that has the second most assets built into it in the NFL and finding to put those in other places, and where to put those in what places, these places exactly. And I maintain, I know that this is a bit of a slight contention between us, that if you want to address this offensive line and you want to turn this offensive line into a top 5 unit for the next season, I believe you can do so this offseason. I believe you can take those steps, but it's going to require you to take some strong steps and to make it a priority. And that's something that, in my opinion, this team on the offensive line, Brendan, over the last 9-10 years has not done. And that's why it's in the state it's in right now. That's why it's having the season it is. You got a right guard playing left guard. You have a left guard playing right guard. And you got a center you're paying $2 million on the year, and you hope that was going to be good enough. That's not an investment. That's taking secondhand parts and hoping you can kind of just get by on it. And that mentality is why it's failing. It's the lack of willingness to make it a priority, like as though it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we get Oluwatimi for this last game, because this last game, I mean, we don't need to see Evan Brown coming off a concussion. That would be like really bad. He's probably be even worse than he usually is, and he's already not good.
He's ready to blow Oluwatimi in this very game.
Yeah, and also Evan Brown is having this. He can't snap the ball very well, it seems like lately. He can't even do that. So even if Oluwatimi is going to do some of that, it's not worse. So at least give us one full game with Oluwatimi here to close it out, so we can get some idea of what's going on here.
I have a hard time, Carol, sitting there saying in his head that, well, I start Oluwatimi. That's going to be one of the reasons we lose this game in any way that this plays out, right?
Right.
That's not going to be your defining factor of this game of whether you win or lose or not.
Mm-hmm. Be calm, see clearly. Thank you for the $2. Has Pete drafted one All-Pro offensive lineman? Russell Okung made the Pro Bowl twice. I don't think he ever made All-Pro.
No.
Max Unger was.
He didn't draft Unger.
Was he a Ruskell pick or a?
I believe he was a Ruskell pick. He wasn't taken by Carroll.
Okay, so I think that's about it then.
Yeah, the answer is no. Not even a second teamer.
Yeah, it is hard to get an All-Pro. I mean, he has drafted a Pro Bowler, but only one. I mean, the strategy for years, and I know what the strategy was. It was offensive linemen coming out of college football suck. So instead of spending a really high pick on one, let's just spend really low picks and get UDFAs and mold them, because we're going to be starting from the same point anyway, because these guys aren't being taught how to play offensive line in college. They're just playing patty cake because of all the spread offenses. I know what the strategy was, but it didn't work. It didn't work at all. And it did work for some other teams. I think New England had some success doing that for a while there. But for the Seahawks, The closest we came was like J.R. Sweezy. We drafted J.R. Sweezy in the 7th round, and he became a pretty decent right guard. But other than that, every experimental offensive lineman we took was a complete train wreck. Like Christian Sokolai and what was the other guy's name? God,
Drew Nowak.
Drew Nowak was another good one. Just like we probably were a little too committed to the bit there. We probably stuck with it a little too long. We stuck with Tom Cable 2 years too long, and that's what you get.
Well, and I could like you say, that was the wrong outlook on it to believe that drafting high offensive linemen, there would be no difference essentially in drafting a high offensive lineman to go take secondhand parts in the 4th, 5th, 6th round. And when you look at the team and the investment they made on the offensive line through 11, 12-year period, go look at how many picks were actually made for 1st and 2nd round. And if you look at it and you run through the names, you get pretty quickly through those names as the number of guys that you allotted to pick in those rounds through that time period. And if you want a quality, you got to pay for quality. And if you're not going to pay for it in free agency, and what we know about the Seahawks during that time period, Brendan, is, as you know as well, you didn't give one drafted lineman during that period a second contract, not one. And you also didn't go out in free agency and go to sign any offensive lineman in free agency of any note either. That was really substantially good as well. So you don't invest from a draft pick standpoint. You don't build them well enough to give them a second contract here. And then you're not going to pay for them on the open market. That's why I say we've arrived at this stage of this offensive line being as bad as it is because of these decisions all bearing out to this point of it being it this way. And you can reverse it. That's not to be just negative on it. You can reverse the opposite direction of that if you make it more of the onus in what you want to do and make it more of that priority. Because you want a good offensive line. You look across the league, Brendan, at the good offensive lines across the board. They're being gotten by going out there and putting the quality into them, by actually dedicating the resources to make it happen.
And, also I'm thinking back to like the old days when I was making videos in like 2016, 2017, 2018. I would talk about these offensive line things. And what some people would say was, well, Wilson took all the money. There's no money to get any offensive linemen because Wilson took all the money. So therefore we can't spend any money on offensive, which was not true. That was very obviously not how it works in the NFL. There are plenty of teams that can spend big on a quarterback and still spend on offensive linemen. But I find it very funny that this year is the first year in 12 years where you don't have a top of the league investment in a quarterback. And the offensive line is actually as bad as it's ever been, maybe worse. Like this is right down there with the 2017 offensive line. So it's like, no, that's not the excuse. That it's not that. It's just a lack of commitment.
So the Russell taking the money thing lands for me, but it lands for me because of the fact that it's the specific situation Russell was in here with Coach Carroll. It's not other quarterbacks in other situations. It's Russell Wilson with Coach Carroll in this situation. And what I mean by that is that when Russell Wilson is commanding the salary he's commanding, you have a defensive-minded head coach where you're going to have to make a decision somewhere when you pay the quarterback top 3, top 4 money in this sport. We agree on this, right? You're going to have to, there's somewhere in your team you're not going to be able to spend as much on. There's some places on your team you're going to have to pull back a normal cost that other teams are going to be able to get away with who have a quarterback that's not taking up that kind of money on their books. We're at least on the agreement on that, right? You would say?
Yeah. I mean, I understand where it comes from.
So then you've got that, and you have a defensive coach who then those assets, like you talk about, other teams will take to dump into let's say the offensive line and actually build a good offensive line up. You always have that defensive coach who has that nature that wants to pour those assets into the defensive side of the ball. So it becomes it's not just merely the Russell contract, it's the Russell contract plus the Coach Carroll's want to dump endless assets into the defensive side of the ball that then pulls away then from that offensive line.
Yeah, but to me, that's a problem with Carroll, right?
Right.
That's Carroll's problem because it doesn't really make a lot of sense to spend a ton of money on a quarterback and then say, okay, we're not going to give you the stuff you need. It would be like, it's kind of like what we're seeing with the Chiefs this year, right? They have Patrick Mahomes and no receivers for him to throw to. It's like the Twilight Zone episode where the guy's glasses break. There was time now, but I can't read because my glasses broke. It's like, it's such a waste. Like Patrick Mahomes is being wasted. And as a Chiefs fan, I can't be, if I was a Chiefs fan, I wouldn't be furious about anything because the team has been so successful lately. But there would be a part of me that's like, this is a year of Patrick Mahomes that we have wasted that we can never get back because we gave him nothing to throw to. To me, if you're going to invest that much money in a quarterback, you have to then say, okay, we better make a reciprocal investment in what he's working with.
Is it
And
that
I
they
know
didn't-
that's not how Pete thinks, but that is how he should think.
Is it that the Chiefs didn't put the investment into the position, or is that the investment that they put in the position hasn't worked out? And that's a
Oh,
key difference here. And when we talk about the two is in relation.
I mean, Kelsey's kind of washed up now. I know his numbers are okay, but he's been this year.
Yeah, but
So
you're going to
maybe
walk.
they didn't plan for that. Maybe they didn't know if it was going to be this year, next year, the year after, whatever.
Right.
They let Juju go. That's actually been a bigger deal than I thought it was going to be. I didn't think they were going to miss him at all. Rashee Rice has actually been pretty decent. But
Sky
I mean,
Moore. So Rashee Rice, second round pick. He's worked out well for them. Sky Moore's a second round pick that's been a bust for them, but was not looked at as some reach when they made the pick of him. A lot of people thought that was going to be a very good receiver.
mm-hmm.
And then you've got the second round pick that they gave up for Kadarius Toney, which neither of you are like the deal. But the point on this is that it's the difference between I'm not going to put any resources into this versus we put resources into it, but the resources we've just put into this now don't really work out. And that's the difference between my situation when we're talking about the Wilson Carroll dynamic and that teens versus like the Chiefs dynamic right now. Because that's right. So I mean, that's where I kind of see it with them, where they've, it's a little, that's the different of the level where you had to make the choice somewhere. And they did choose the offensive lines where we're going to cheap. I think we spent the least amount of money at that during that period of time when Russell was here. And like you say, it doesn't make any sense to do that. But that's also, like you say, you're completely right. It's a Carroll problem. But this is also why I'm not really a fan of the defensive-minded head coaches, among many reasons, because this is what's going to happen there in their ideology. They're always going to want, even when there's times that the signs point them to just put it to the offense, like this offseason, for instance, Brendan, like we've talked about on this show. Even when you have so many of these signs telling you that, there's always that, let's dump more. Let's just get the defense. Just keep going. And it's second amount. What'd you say? Second amount of most we're pouring into the defense this season?
Second to the Niners in terms of money spent.
Second to the Niners in terms of money spent. It's you keep going down that road. And so it's like, and we're even now kind of even to the point here, because do we have the money for the interior offensive line? Because now we have a quarterback making a little bit of money. And you're going to need to pay more into the defense. Do we get past the Niners next year for being the most expensive defense? Because that's what's going to take to fix this. And I know I'm harping on, but that's why I'm really worried on this, because that's the lesson that's not been learned here, even going back for that 5, 6, 7 years time frame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but yeah, I agree. The Chiefs have tried. I think they've made a pretty pathetic attempt at trying. Like, I refuse to give them any credit for trading a third round pick for Kadarius Toney. Like, I'm sorry, that was a massive L. Like, I'm not giving them any credit for that.
Well, I mean, it's not a good pick. It's not a trade I would have made, but it is them trying to get their quarterback guys out there that can make him dynamic, get the most out of his skill set, and it's a team doing that as well as now they start to have their quarterback. Because let's remember with Mahomes now, as he's into the third year of that new deal he signed 3 years ago, the money is now starting to hit. They're having to make their own kind of tough decisions. And it's not just as easy as free as go sign to this receiver out here or just package all these picks to go get this one first rounder up over here. They've got to get now when you're paying that quarterback, even the Chiefs, even with Mahomes and all the times he's renegotiated twice over on this contract to begin this, they're now getting hung up in that. And that's been my whole point with these quarterbacks you paying this money is that you can't get away from it. You're going to pay the price somewhere. They're doing what they can, but they can't go whole hog with it because of some of those impediments, in my opinion.
All right. Well, I mean, the point is, regardless of whether or not it's their fault, this is kind of a wasted year for Mahomes, I think, because his receivers are maybe the worst in the league. And it's such a waste to have a quarterback this good, this talented, and give him nothing to throw to. That's kind of the point I'm making.
Yeah, but again, you're going to miss on picks. You're going to miss on guys. If they were going out there and trotting a lot of 4th, 5th, 6th rounders out there, I would be more open to your opinion on this. But when you're throwing 3 second-round picks out there in the receiving core, when you spend some money on Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who I don't like, but hey, he's a guy that they like, and that they, from their standpoint, we're putting our resources into it. And when you can say what you will about Kelsey falling off, he wasn't falling off last year. What do you have? 100 catches and 1,300 yards or something like that?
He was great last year. He was phenomenal last year.
It wasn't going to continue forever, but they didn't walk into this year with some sort of, well, we're going to have to hope that Mahomes can throw the Superman cape on and, just kind of make it happen. They've recognized especially a couple of years ago after that Tampa Bay Super Bowl, when they went back and reinvested in their offensive line like they had, I think they've taken a lot of big steps to try to get Mahomes the most they can. Those moves aren't moves that worked out. Those moves maybe were bad to look at on the surface of things, but it doesn't mean the intent wasn't there to try to give him more around him, which I think is more, that's kind of the key on this discussion we're having. I think more than it is the results of it, what was the intent? And the intent was to try to get him some playmakers out there. I didn't think Sky Moore was going to fall this badly off. There's a lot of people that thought he was one of the better receivers coming out in that draft. It's just, he's not looked anywhere close to the prospect he was coming out.
Right. So back to kind of loop, we kind of went off on a crazy direction there, but back to the original point that I'm making, it's like you actually had money this, like your quarterback gave you a break. And I know some people don't want to hear this, but Geno Smith gave us a big break with that contract. I don't think we even understand fully how big a break he gave us with that contract, because the nature of the incentives are team friendly. He can be cut at pretty much any time, and it's team friendly. It's not that much money per year. Like, there's actually money to spend now, and still this defense is terrible and this offensive line is terrible. It kind of makes me laugh, because for years I would go after Pete for failing to put together these things. People would say, oh, it's because Russ took all the money. And now that we don't have Russ, it's still just as bad.
Mm-hmm. Because I think he's also started to even steer more assets into that defense than ever before, and the diminishing returns of the defense on a yearly basis, less and less and less and less. But you're pouring more and more and more into it. And so now there is that offset doesn't go back to the offense, Brendan, like you're intimating with the Geno savings. Instead of that, it just goes back over into the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah. And it doesn't help the team win at all, because the defense
right.
is still really bad.
And we still don't get any better.
There's something so viscerally disgusting to me about watching Geno Smith have to go out there every week and have to be basically perfect for us to have a chance to win these games. Mm-hmm. Like he is Deshaun Watson or something, like he's, Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert, like he's one of these top of the market quarterbacks, when he's not even halfway to those guys in terms of making money. He's making half what those guys make. And still Pete has to be like every week, okay, go out there and be perfect so we can win. I did such a bad job building up every other element of this team. So Geno, DK, JSN, Walker, you guys go be perfect and maybe we'll win. Yeah. There's just something about that that's just very, very distasteful to me. I hate it.
Well, it's like even that press conference they had on Monday, they first started talking about the offense, and Carroll's like harping on not getting more third down conversions offensively. Like, why aren't we talking about that defense first thing? Why aren't we getting into right off the gate what the hell was going on there? And that's where, for me, I'm going to be standing with my foot on the tail of this one all off season. I watched that game. Najee Harris runs up over the A gap all day long at a shotgun, and you don't do nothing about it. You have no answers to it. You got 3rd and 4s. You got guys continually dropping to 10 yards of space of depth and zone coverage. That ain't talent. That's a scheme that's playing to some weird depth to give up the first down on a continual basis, which allows the long drives, which allows the time of possession to be fluxed out, which then makes your offense, like you're saying, not only have to be perfect, but be perfect in a smaller amount of period of time, because they're going to lose naturally the time of possession more just naturally, because that defense is going to allow so many conversions and so many long drives over the course of a game. I don't like seeing it as well. This is why you and I are so high on Geno. And if you could give him those things up front, give him a functional defense, give him functional pass protection, give him a functional ground game on somewhat of a weekly basis, maybe. How about just every other week? I'll take that. And you're going to see a guy who I think will perform very well. The bang for the buck will be awesome at that point. That's really the bottom line. And if you got a lot of players on your team that you're getting the best bang for a buck, you're maximizing the roster to the utmost there for the value, and that should be a good team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm going to say something a little crazy here, because I know my comment section would lose their minds if this happened. But if the team decided this offseason they want to extend Geno a couple years to reduce his cap hit, push it out a little bit, I'd be okay with that. I wouldn't even be mad. I would be like, okay, cool. Okay. I think Geno could play good for another 3-4 years. I'll take that. And my comment section, it would be the end of times. I know it would be. But there's no doubt in my mind that Geno's if you were to make a list of problems with the Seahawks this year, he's like down in like the 40s or 50s.
Agreed. I just don't think he's much like we talk about the guy like DK. There's the guys that are helping this team are pretty clear at this point, because there's a lot of guys here across the board we can find that aren't helping the team, that are standing out. And so I don't get caught up for too long, or nor do I look to how fast can we get off a guy that's helping us to win football games right now, as opposed to those guys that aren't. And he is, and I would be in the same boat you were. If they gave him that deal to save up some money on this year's cap, whoever you go and draft as a quarterback, the real key for me on that guy is that I want him to be stepping on the field when he's ready. Not doing what a lot of teams do where it's, we drafted the guy, get on the field, get him on the field. Come on, get him out there. Instead, let him get out there by natural order. Aaron Rodgers sat for 3 years before he got it on the football field. Didn't hurt him too long. We get in this thinking that they all got to get out there and start playing immediately. I think more in the thinking of there can be a benefit and a value to a young player having a little bit of time to kind of learn the sport rather than being thrown out into the deep end and see if he swims or not. Oh, he went below the water. You going to go get him? No, he'll figure it out yet.
We'll go get another one. I had no faith in that guy. This next guy.
Yeah, he just landed next to the other one in the pool. Oh, that's funny. They landed. They're touching each other at the bottom. Go give me a draft, another one now.
Yeah, exactly. And Jordan Love. Look at Jordan Love. He's actually looking pretty good this year. And this was a guy that I did not like. He sat for I think 3 years, and they're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, Green Bay's taking that old formula and applying it. And they would tell you, I'm sure if they were having this talk with us, yeah, there's a value to doing it. There's a value to letting those guys sit. And it gets spoken about like it's a no-brainer that you just have. There's really no value by a guy. This is what I hear a lot from analysts now. There's no value in having a guy sit. You just want to get out there and learn what you got. You got to figure out what you got. I go, no, that does not seem like the smart approach for a young guy coming out in an NFL that's very complex and there's a lot to learn and it's the hardest position to play in the sport with all you have on your shoulders. It would seem like for that kind of position, you want to give that guy a couple of years to kind of figure out and really understand his trade before you're out there throwing him to the wolves.
And some guys can handle that. Andrew Luck handled it. Russell Wilson handled it. Dan Marino could handle it. Matt Ryan could handle it. But the guys the Seahawks can get in this draft, because I assume the top 3 are all going to be gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I also kind of think Penix will be gone after that performance last night. I think that really turned some people onto him.
Very, very possible.
Yeah. So that's the top 4. So that means the guys the Seahawks can get, which is going to be like Cam Ward, Spencer Rattler, Joe Milton, maybe Bo Nix. Like those guys probably won't be able to do it so well. You're probably better off sitting those guys for at least a little bit of time.
To me, Cam Ward becomes the early on one now that starts to stand out of like, this is the exact, to your point on what you do, because you get him in the 3rd round. He's a guy that goes back to college this next year, and he's in a similar situation to where Penix was. It's different circumstances, but similar in that he gets to have his pick of the litter of college programs he goes to, right? Places that he's going to get to go to that'll help him look at his best. He's coming off a good season anyway with WSU. He goes back now another year and maybe he elevates himself into the top of the 1st round. Yet this offseason, you're able to get that guy in the 3rd round or maybe in the back of the 2nd round if you want to trade up for him at that point. And he's got some legitimate talent to him. You can afford to then let him sit, to your point on that, where he should have been going back to college and played another year of college. We'll have him sit a year and maybe sit a 2nd year at that point if that's what he needs as well. But you have him then there waiting in the wings. And I would have no problem with going down that pathway with this.
Right. Anything else to talk about with this offense?
Forsythe got screwed over by the PFF scores. He did really great. He came in with a tough, that was a tough pull with TJ Watt to come off the bench. And I thought he did a really good job of rerouting him through the pocket on a couple of different bases, using his momentum against him. I thought he did a really good job out there for what you're asked to do there, going against one of the best pass rushers in all of the NFL at that point.
Yeah. I was a little bit confused by that PFF grade. I got to be honest. I was a little bit like, part of me was like, well, what's he going to do? He's going in there against TJ Watt. He's a backup player. Like, I'm not going to hold anything against him. Whatever happens here happens. But then he actually went out there and actually, I thought, played okay. I don't get it.
I did too. Telecast did a good job on a couple of shots, catching him, working TJ well. I mean, winning the rep, not just sort of holding on for dear life, but winning the rep and winning it true. PFF's had a few of the line scores this year that have had me scratching my head at times.
Yeah, I don't really get that. Charbonnet had to play a lot because he was the third down back passing down back, and we were in passing downs constantly. He made some catches out of the backfield, helped out the cause a little bit. I was pretty happy with him, I guess.
Me too. Yeah, he was good. Showed off some of the hands out there. He still doesn't do a lot in the ground game at this point in recent weeks. He's gone a little bit backwards there, but some of that's run blocking too.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really about it. We now that I think about it, we really should have spent this whole show only talking about Jason Myers because he went 3 for 3. So I guess we're good there now, right? We're good.
Well, him and Dixon had a hell of a game too. Still, so
Yeah,
he did his part.
when you think about it, we always say it's even year Myers, right? But it was the last day of 2023, and he actually went 3 of 3. So he overcame the odd year Meyer curse. I mean, it was literally like
You're
9 hours.
You're jinxing this, Brendan. We have a game left, man. You're
Yeah.
jinxing this. He's going 0 for 3 now for sure, folks.
Well, it's in Arizona, so that's probably going to happen regardless.
It's true. That's
Remember
very
the
true.
house go for 3 game in Arizona, and we still
I
won
do.
35-6.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That was
I
a fun
remember
one. I think that's really about all that need be said. It was a really, really tragic game. There was some good stuff. I was encouraged by Waldron, encouraged by Gino, DK Walker, but man, did we just make those Eagles and Titans wins feel pretty much meaningless.
Yeah, you've lost your control of the situation, and you got to hope the Packers are going to lose to a not good Bears team. And so, hopefully that can happen. But you had every opportunity this season in a weak NFC to go out there and take hold of this and to make some hay. And the team just never took that sense of urgency. You never really felt it on the field, universally speaking. At least a couple players would show it to you, but it certainly is a disappointing one in a year that I think overall is going to end up being disappointing and looking back on it. And just that's where it's at, man. That's where it's gone this year, unfortunately.
Bears playing really good lately, though. 5-2 in their last 7, and both of those losses were kind of fluky. They could be on a 7-game win streak.
Montez Sweat's been a great addition for them over there, and Fields back in the flow, and maybe they can pull it off. It's a divisional game too, Brendan, right? Those always tend to play a little more even Steven than they do play where one team's just gonna go out there and win it, even if the records are a little bit in difference. So hopefully they get it done. We're fighting, we're in it, so there's still a chance, and I would love to see it. You and I both will line up in that respect.
Coda Dad, thank you for the $6.99 Canadian, which is got to be worth at least 35 cents in America. Pete and Jody are Thelma and Louise, except the team is in the car and they're watching from afar and laughing.
With binoculars.
Something like that. Something like that. Yeah, I actually have not seen Thelma and Louise in a long time. That was I think Brad Pitt was in that movie a little bit, if I remember correctly.
He was. There's the spoiler alert. So spoiler alert, Thelma and Louise, if you're still choosing to watch that. Ridley Scott movie, so really well filmed,
Right.
But the ending scene is of course them driving away from the cops off the cliff together as their girl, celebrate, so yeah, I think it's a very apropos. That's what it's on the button. That's on the nose there with that comparison.
Yeah, I mean, is the team the car? Because I wouldn't hate. I wouldn't hate. I mean, they are probably going to both go away in the next couple of years here. That does make sense. But are we saying they're going to take the team with them, or they're going to leave the team and the team is going to get taken over by other people?
I think it's that he's kind of intimating here that the car goes down into the cliff and then they get to just kind of walk away to their next thing, and they're there laughing at the damage caused a bit.
Yeah, something like that. I could go for that. Again, I think the only real argument in favor of keeping Pete around another year is this idea that we're about to sell and desirable coaching candidates are not going to want to come here while we have that over their head. Like, to me, that's at least a good argument. I'm not saying it's convinced me, but that makes sense, right? That's something that actually lines up with logic.
I said I was going to give this 2 years, the full 2 years of this to play out with Carroll and make my assessment on where I would stand and whether he has my support or whether I think he's going to be able to take this anywhere into the future. And my opinion on it is that he's shown enough over these 2 years to tell you that that's not going to be the case on a variety of different levels. Could it happen? Sure, it can happen, but there certainly has not been the signs that it is en route, that it's coming down the tracks. You can see the spotlight on the front of the train. It's just up ahead coming down towards us. Now, there's no indication of that as it stands right now. So my opinion, as I kind of go around the world on this one with your answer, Brendan, is, in my opinion, we've not really been sure about where Jody Allen's truly stood as an owner. We've had guesses. We've had people that have told me in the background that she's actually very much ardently a part of the process, and she's not one to be messed with, and that she's not, take no prisoners, and I'll do what I need to do kind of thing, that is her attitude. My point to that would be this one at this point in time with this is that if that's truly how she feels, then we're going to learn about that this offseason. We're going to learn very clearly whether or not she is active and engaged as an owner, or whether she's hands off, like you're saying, just looking to that sale. And in my opinion, the way that they address this coaching staff this offseason, and Coach Carroll specifically, is going to, in my opinion, dictate a lot of what my opinion is on her standing of that. Because I've maintained for a while now, and I still maintain it, that if Paul Allen was still alive, Coach Carroll would not be the coach of the Seattle Seahawks right now.
I find that very hard to believe that he would still be here with the level of performance that has been or things would be very different, because at the very least, Paul would have demanded, okay, we're getting a real GM and he's going to control all personnel decisions.
That's
Or right. I demand you do this to the defense. I demand you hire this coordinator and you leave him alone and let him do what he wants to do. Stuff like that, maybe.
Paul Allen was not a stand pat kind of guy. Paul Allen was not I'll let him write his own ticket out of town kind of guy. Paul Allen was a guy that was going to force the issue and wasn't going to take any nonsense. And I think there's been some nonsense in this situation lately, and it really should come to an end.
I agree. Jonas Pareja, thank you for the 279 Canadian. Can we get a step down Pete campaign going? Go Hawks.
Go Hawks, Jonas.
Well, I'll tell you, the best step down Pete campaign is having your stadium filled with Steelers fans in a basic playoff environment at home with everything on the line. So, that part of it, we're actually doing what we can.
Saw it against the Niners on Thanksgiving night too, as well. We've seen it a couple times, that stadium taken over. I think that I agree with Brendan on this one, Jonas, that's as clear a sign as you can ask for an ownership to sit up there in their ownership box and look out amongst the crowd and see a sea of yellow. If that doesn't tell you as an ownership group that you have a coach who's having a hard time not only engaging his football team, but the fan base, then I don't know what does. And that's why I come down to saying this thing with Jody on this. If she's passing, it isn't merely she's passing because of this 1 year. It's because, like I said, you've had a couple of years to make this assessment pretty true and real. And you're seeing a lot of the signs holding themselves to that point that this is the right move to make. And yet you don't do it. And so it either is that you're hands off, or it is that you're looking towards a future sale, but it certainly isn't that you're trying to make this team the best it can be right now, or turn it into a contender right now, or doing everything in your power to make sure that can happen. And we'll learn that tale this offseason, in my opinion. And I will come to my conclusions with it, because I think there's a lot adding up to that point if it does reach that stage of things.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't, even if Jody's hands off, she wouldn't be happy about reduced revenue because tickets aren't selling the way she's used to them selling, or, tickets are selling for less, or the stadium's getting filled with opposing fans. Like, she would still care about that no matter how hands off she is.
You would think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know you're right. I would think. I don't know for sure. And I have this question right now in my mind a little bit in regards to this situation and watching how it's been playing out in recent years. It could be the case, but that's where this is one of those key moments, Brendan, where words, actions. I could give a crap about whatever's being said word wise. I'm going to watch the actions. And if you're not willing to make the moves that obviously show themselves needing to be made at this point, then you're telling a lot then in those actions. It's not just some small thing then when you ignore it at that point. Because like you said, there's a lot of data here to say this. It's that I will walk away from it this offseason feeling like she's just kind of biding the time at that point. If we don't see some kind of major
much hope right now.
Not much help coming on down the pipe.
Be calm, see clearly. Thank you for the $2. I'll give my left testicle to see real change.
Be careful, be calm. You never know when a demon's listening and they're going to, do that old, you go out for a walk tomorrow and you end up somehow impelled up on through one testicle.
Some kind of Faustian deal, man. You
exactly. And then as you look over, you see the newspaper headline over across from you says, Coach Carroll out in Seattle, as you're trying to pull the nut off the.
Yeah. Be careful what you wish for.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think that's about it for the show. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Brandon, I want to thank you for coming out and doing this with me.
My pleasure, my brother.
We made it a good show despite the less than happy circumstances of this team right now. So we are going to do this again in a couple days. We've got one more pregame show at least to do this year. We've got the Cardinals going to be hosted on Brandon's channel, but it'll be streamed to all locations as is normal. Yeah, Brandon, I want to thank you again for coming out and doing this with me.
Thank you, man. I appreciate doing this. It's always been a great season, chopping it up with you, even if we haven't always had the greatest of results.
Right. I will be on Twitch a little bit later tonight doing The Witcher 2, moving on through that, Assassins of Kings. And if anybody wants to watch me over there, just tune on in a couple of hours. Yeah, we will do this again Thursday night. And I mean, there's one game left, guys. And I know that the fan base is a little bit split right now. Some people want to make the playoffs. Some people don't. Some people want to win. Some people want to lose. Some people, we don't all want the same thing. But whatever it is that we want this week, we all kind of want it. We all kind of want what we want for the same reason. We want it because we want this team to be better, be it a playoff appearance now or real change happening later. So I'm going to say something that I think we can all get behind going into this final week of the season. And we'll reconvene on Thursday, see how we feel, see what's up. And then we'll see what the team has for us, and we'll see what this season has for us. So thank you to everybody who turned out tonight. And there's nothing left to say except go Hawks.
Go Hawks.